So it is the process, it is the application of audit procedures to less than 100% of items within a population relevant under audit, such that all sampling units have an equal chance of selection. Okay? And we understood that population, for example, if we have to check the trade receivable, so entire set of trade receivable is the population. Individual units that comprises that population is what? Sampling units. And the sampling units that got selected as a sample for audit sampling, that becomes a sample. An auditor will perform his audit procedures on that sample, the sample that has been selected, and whatever result he'll get for that sample, he will project it on the entire population. That is, based on the result of the sample, he'll estimate about the entire population. Okay? So I hope the voice is clear now, students. Is it clear? Okay. When we discuss scope of SA 530, we saw that applying audit sampling is not mandatory. It is a matter of professional judgment of the auditor. And if auditor applies audit sampling when he is conducting the audit of an organization, so SA 530, the scope extends to statistical sampling as well as non-statistical, whereby it covers the entire process of sampling, that is designing and selecting the audit sample, performing test of control and test of details, and evaluating the results from the sample. Then I told you that SA 500 specifies the means of selecting the items for testing. There are 3 means that has been specified by SA 500, which are selecting all the items, selecting specific items, and the third one is auditing sampling, the details of which are given in SA 530 audit sampling. So that is why we say that SA 530 complements SA 500. Okay, population we have seen. There need to be 3 characteristics of the population, that is appropriateness, completeness, and reliable. If the 3 characteristics are present in the population, for example, I gave example of trade receivables. Hana? So if the entire set, the data that is available with respect to trade receivable, that should be appropriate, relevant. That should be complete, and that should be reliable. Then only the sample that is selected on which audit procedures will be performed, that will be correct, and then only the result will be appropriate. Okay? Sampling unit is the individual items that make up the population. And what is extrapolation? Whatever result you get for the sample, when you estimate it for the entire population, when you generalize it for the entire population, it means the process of extrapolation. That is, your conclusion for sample will become the conclusion for the entire population. Okay? Then we saw that sampling process can be performed with test of controls also. And with test of control, we use the word deviation. If there is a mistake, or then we call it as deviation from the expected internal control. And to perform test of details when the auditor is identifying the misstatement of account balances and class of transactions. Okay? There are 2 approaches, statistical, non-statistical. As the name suggests, statistical has what? Random selection of the sample items, use of probability theory to evaluate the results, and it also takes into consideration what? The sampling risk characteristics. What is sampling risk? We'll be discussing today. Okay? Statistical is based on mathematical laws of probability. There is no personal bias. In large organization with huge transactions, this is the process which is recommended. Okay? What is non-statistical? The sampling method that is not having any of the above features. That is neither probability theory nor any consideration of sampling risk. It is based on the personal experience, knowledge of the auditor, his judgment. Okay? Then we understood the concept of what are the various factors that should be considered by the auditor when he's deciding upon the extent of checking. So size of organization, state of internal control, adequacy, reliability of books of and records, tolerable error range, degree of desired confidence. Okay. Then what are the advantages of statistical sampling we covered, and then we started with the sampling process which consists of these steps: sample design, sample size, sample selection method, audit procedures to be performed, then nature and cause of deviation and misstatement to be understood by the auditor, then projecting of misstatement and evaluating results of audit sampling. We covered the first step, that is sample design, in our last lecture, whereby I told you that when the auditor has to design a sample, so what is sample design? It is basically a plan to obtain a sample from the population. So first of all, we as an auditor, we should be sure as to what is the purpose, why we are drawing the sample, what audit procedures we want to perform, what audit evidence we require, right? Then auditor also needs to know about the population, its characteristics, whether it is appropriate, complete, reliable, and whether all the features that are required are available in the population or not. And in order to understand the characteristics of the population, the auditor may go for stratification or value-weighted selection. In the last session, I told you what is stratification. I'll do one thing at the end of the session, if the time will permit, I'll explain this concept of stratification and value-weighted selection again with the help of statistical examples, if time permits. Okay? Last session, what did we discuss? Stratification mein what auditor does is he stratifies, he divides, classifies the entire population into subpopulation. Subpopulation is known as what? Stratum. And then he draws sample from each stratum. Okay? The unit of each stratum is called stratum. What is the benefit of stratification? See, if the entire population, which is different, it is subgrouped in similar homogeneous population, then the variability, the difference between the population reduces. Okay? And the sampling risk also reduces, though the sample size will remain the same. Okay? So this was about stratification. It may be done on any basis, like auditor may divide it as if he's stratifying the trade receivables, then north, south, east, west, okay, or by age or by amount. Okay? So this is stratification. Then we discussed value-weighted selection, whereby here the auditor is not selecting any invoice. The auditor is not selecting any trade receivable. He is selecting the amount of the trade receivable. So he is attaching weight to the value. Okay? And by applying the formula, by cumulatively calculating all the values of the trade receivable, auditor will be selecting the sample. So basically everything, selection of sample size, selection of items, evaluation of the result, it will be done in monetary terms, in rupees. Okay? Instead of saying that out of 10,000 vouchers, I'll be taking on sample basis 1,000 vouchers, he'll be saying that I'll be taking 10,000 value of the transaction. So value is been given weightage here. Okay? How the auditor will be doing that, if time permits, I'll definitely show you the practical example, though that is not as such relevant from your examination point of view, but yes, for your understanding, it will definitely help you. Okay? Now let me just have a look at the queries, and then we'll start with topic 4.2, which is sample size. Okay? So there is a query with respect to stratification and value weighted. Hana, Aditi, Karthik, they all are asking this. So we will take this question when we'll be discussing various methods of sampling. Then at that point, I'll show you the examples. Okay? Now, today, the new topic for today is what? Sample size. So the first step of the sampling process, which is what sample design is done. Okay. Now, what should be the sample size? Okay. What should be the sample size is the next question. Okay. See, auditor, he will determine the sample size. Okay. And for the time being, just try to understand that sampling risk is a risk associated with what? Sampling. If auditor is doing sampling, that is, he's checking on a sample basis. That is, he's not checking 100% transaction. Some risk will always be there. Hana? As audit has its inherent limitation. Hana? Inherent limitation tha, time and cost ka. That's why we resorted to sampling. Now, sample as a process, it itself has some limitations. It cannot give 100% accurate results. Okay? So that is called what? Sampling risk. What is sampling risk? We'll be discussing in detail. Okay? Now, when the auditor has to decide the sample size, definitely he will apply his what? Professional judgment. He can apply various statistical based formula. Okay? And students, since I told you that whenever sampling will be there will be certain kind of sampling risk. Okay? Now, just answer to my question that if the auditor wants to reduce the sampling risk, what should be the sample size? It should be more or it should be less. If the auditor intends to reduce the sampling risk, right? So he should select a larger sample size or a smaller sample size. Quickly send in your replies. Absolutely correct. Many of you are saying, in fact, all of you are saying large or more. See, if auditor wants to reduce the sampling risk, that risk associated with doing sampling should be reduced. So how will it be reduced? By taking a larger sample so that the extent of checking is increased. Okay? And then there are various statistical methods which helps to select the samples, sample size also. And auditor can apply his professional judgment. When the auditor is deciding the sample size, be it with the help of statistical based formula or be it by applying his professional judgment, there are certain factors that has an effect on the sample size. So we will do one thing. I'll ask you these questions. I've made this table, this topic in a tabular format. I want all of you to reply. So what is this topic? We are discussing about sample size. So the intention of the auditor will always be to reduce the sampling risk. And for that, in case the auditor wants to reduce the sampling risk, he needs to take a larger sample size. Okay? Then I told you it depends upon various factors. So let us discuss this topic by dividing it into two parts. That what are the factors that influence the sample size in case audit sampling is done in test of control? That is when auditor is checking internal control. Same way, what are the factors that have an influence on the sample size when the auditor is doing what? Test of details. Okay? That is when he's checking the transactions and account balances. A very simple, a very interesting topic, and yes, very, very important for your true false, for your MCQs. And yes, I have also uploaded the MCQs true false descriptive question. And if the time will permit, we'll discuss one or two case studies also, case scenarios. Okay? So now answer to this first part. The question is clear that these are the factors that have an impact on the sample size. Now, first factor, in case of internal control, auditor is doing audit sampling with respect to testing of internal controls of an organization. Now, the first situation, an increase in the extent to which auditor's risk assessment takes into account relevant controls. An increase in the extent to which auditor's risk assessment takes into account relevant control. So tell me, basically it wants to say that auditor needs more assurance. Abhi we are talking about what? Only test of control, internal control. ठीक है? So auditor needs more assurance. है ना? Now in such a situation, tell me, will the sample size with respect to test of controls will be more or less? So the answer is what? It will be more. Simple. Because he needs more assurance. ज़्यादा तसल्ली करनी है तो check it in detail ना. Take a larger sample size. Simple. Just apply logic. ज़्यादा satisfaction चाहिए ना. Do detailed checking. Just tell yourself that if the auditor needs more satisfaction, that can be obtained by doing more work. More work implies what? A higher sample, a greater sample size. ठीक है? Understood? Now, second part. Just look at the second part, है ना? And keep on writing one more, two, जो भी answer है second का. An increase in tolerable rate of deviation. ठीक है? This concept we'll be doing in the second half of the session. But what is tolerable rate of deviation? पहले understand करिए ये. See, when the auditor is checking the internal controls, है ना? On a sample basis, he will develop an expectation. He will develop an expectation that this much of the deviation in the internal control is tolerable. Itna to I will tolerate, but beyond that, I will not tolerate. ठीक है? इतना deviation है out of 10. If at 2 times the internal control was not working, that is fine. But beyond that, I will not tolerate. I will not rely on internal control. Basically, I will not rely on internal control there. ठीक है? Now, if there is an increase in the tolerable rate of deviation, ठीक है? Increase in the tolerable rate की ठीक है. अगर ज़्यादा mistake भी हो जाता है, दो ज़्यादा deviation भी हो जाता है, then also it's fine. It is not material for me. Tell me, the sample size will be. Yes, it will be what? A smaller sample size will be sufficient. ठीक है? Why? Because tolerable rate, ज़्यादा tolerate करने के लिए he is ready. कितना ज़्यादा भी mistake हो जाता है, then it's fine. है ना? So less checking will also be fine in this case. ठीक है? I hope it is clear. All of you are giving correct answer. Now the third one. An increase in the expected rate of deviation of the population to be tested. Now, auditor has an understanding that there is increase in the expected rate of deviation of the population to be tested. Anna, I can say the auditor understands that there is an increase in the risk of material misstatement. So tell me, in this case, what will be the impact on the sample size? So auditor is checking the internal control and he is of the view that the expected rate of deviation of population to be tested, that is the internal controls to be tested, he is expecting that the rate of deviation is high. ज़्यादा deviation है तो risky है ना, तो उस risk को कम करने के लिए आप क्या करेंगे? Yes, a larger sample size, which is absolutely correct. Meghna, Akash, Neil, Himanshu, Ban Reddy, Karthik, absolutely correct. ठीक है? Now the fourth one. An increase in auditor's desired level of assurance that the tolerable rate of deviation is not exceeded by the actual rate of deviation in the population. Basically, a higher assurance from the internal control is required. That is, if auditor has maintained a tolerable rate that okay, 20% I can tolerate, 20% of deviation, that out of 10, if 2 times the internal control was not working, that is fine. ठीक है? But auditor wants to have an assurance that this 20% should not, this actual rate should not be more than the 20% of tolerable. So what will auditor do? He will do what? More checking. Is it clear? Yes, more checking. ठीक है? So that he can be sure that tolerable rate, that 20%, that rate is not exceeded by the actual deviation. Clear? So Himanshu, Akash, Neel, Aditi, Ban Reddy, Karthik, Siddhant, Bhardwaj, all are absolutely correct. Okay? Now the last one. An increase in the sampling units in the population. Please answer to this question carefully. An increase in the number of sampling units in the population. Answer to this fifth part. So I'll divide it into two parts. Okay? Let's say if it is a large population, and let's say if it is a small population. So Sarthak is saying no change, Pooja is saying no change. Dhanalakshmi, in which point are you asking? ठीक है, देखो. An increase in the number of sampling units in the population means an increase in the population, because sampling unit, what it constitutes the population. Okay? Now students, if there is a small population, then if you remember, we have already discussed, then it's better not to go for audit sampling. Then it is better for the auditor to go for 100% checking, because in such situation where the number of transactions are small, 100% checking are if auditor goes for 100% checking, then he will in a position to get better results vis-a-vis a situation whereby he is checking on a sample basis. So I can say, in case of small population, checking on sample basis is not advisable. In case of large population, just try to understand this with the help of this example. Suppose this is a bowl of soup. Okay? And I have asked you to taste it. So you will take a spoon and you will taste it, and you will be in a position to tell me whether it is good or not. Okay? Now suppose this is an entire pot of soup, and I have asked you to taste it. Now the population size has increased. Will your sample also increase? No, that one spoon will be sufficient. It won't happen that now you have to taste the entire bowl out of this pot. So an increase in the population will not have, or will have a negligible effect on the sample size. Just keep this example in mind. This point with respect to large population is going to be very clear to you. Okay? Is it clear? So small population में it is also always advisable for the auditor to go for 100% checking and not to resort to audit sampling. With respect to large population, the increase in the population is going to have a negligible or no effect on the sample size. Is it clear? Quickly tell me. I need answers. Is it clear? Is it clear? Many of you have answered all the 5 correctly. Okay? So what we are discussing? We are discussing about what? The factors that have an impact on sample size when the auditor is resorting to audit sampling when he is performing test of controls. Now, same way when the auditor is performing test of details, okay, that is, he is checking the financial statements, he is checking the transactions and account balances. Then what are the factors and what are the effect on the sample size? This is also absolutely same. There are 2-3 extra factors which we'll be discussing, and we'll be quickly going through it. So you can quickly send me answers 1, 2, 3. All the 3 points are on your screen. So an increase in the auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement. देखो कैसे समझना है? There is increase in risk of material misstatement. ठीक है? But audit risk को तो auditor needs to take it to an acceptably low level. जिसके लिए auditor को क्या करना पड़ेगा? He will have to reduce detection risk. Reducing detection risk means he will have to increase his extent of checking, which implies what? An increased sample size. Clear? Simple है ना? So you need to understand the reasoning also. See, an increase in auditor's assessment of risk of material misstatement. Risk of material misstatement ज़्यादा है, but audit risk को तो auditor needs to reduce it to an acceptably low level. So what is the factor that auditor can control? Detection risk. How? By increasing the extent of checking. That means a larger sample size. ठीक है? An increase in use of, understand this point, an increase in the use of other substantive procedure directed at the same assertion. Suppose auditor is checking trade receivable on sample basis. ठीक है? He's checking certain assertion of trade receivable on a sample basis. He's applying certain other procedures also. So tell me, can this sample size be lower? Because the assurance that he wants, he can obtain that assurance from these substantive procedures also. So a lower sample size will be sufficient. So Karthik, Akashnil, you are correct. Aditi, check your answer. Hiral, you are correct. Okay. Now the third point, an increase in auditor's desired level of assurance that the tolerable misstatement is not exceeded by the actual misstatement in the population. Let's say auditor has said that he has determined that up to rupees 5 lakhs, any mistake is tolerable. Now auditor wants to be sure that the actual misstatement should not exceed this 5 lakhs. अब उसको more assurance चाहिए ना. So tell the auditor, now auditor, you need more assurance, do more work, have a larger sample size. Simple. Hiral, check your answer for third. ठीक है? ठीक है? An increase in tolerable misstatement. Earlier auditor was thinking that till 5 lakh मैं सिर्फ tolerate करूंगा, इससे ज्यादा नहीं. But now auditor is saying चलो ठीक है 7 lakhs तक is also fine. तो compare the sample size from here to here. It will increase or decrease? Tell me quickly, will it increase or will it decrease? It can be decreased. Akashnil, correct. Pooja, you are correct. Meghna, you are correct. Aditi, you are correct. Okay. Now, an increase in the amount of misstatement that auditor expects to find in the population. Auditor expects that there is a misstatement. So just try to understand this like this. That earlier auditor was thinking that a misstatement of, let's say, 5 lakh can be there. But now he is expecting that this 5 lakh can reach up to 10 lakh. अब बताओ ना ऑडिटर क्या करेगा? चेकिंग ज्यादा करेगा. सिंपल. Hitesh, yes, your answers are coming. ठीक है? So the fifth one is a larger sample size. ठीक है? Clear? Yes, Sudeep, handwriting is somewhat important, है ना? It should be readable, ना? So stratification of the population when appropriate. Now tell me about this. See, if there are 10,000 items, let's say, of 4 products, A, B, C, D. Okay? Now, I as an auditor, I want a lower sampling risk. Okay? So, since there is variability of data, I want to reduce the sampling risk. I will have to increase the sample size. Okay? Abhi, the explanation is not complete. Listen to me. But if I stratify this data, okay, earlier in this is case A. Here I am what? I am selecting my sample from this 10,000. And since there is difference in data, my sampling risk is high. Why? Because if I select 100 items, it might be possible na, that all 100 comes from this A. Hana? So I as an auditor, I may think to have a sample of 200 in order to reduce my sampling risk. Now consider a situation B, whereby I divide this population, Hana, and I select 25 items from each of these stratums. tell me now my sampling risk will be reduced though I have not increased my sample size now. So it says that if there is stratification of the population and it is appropriate in such a situation, if sampling risk is to be reduced, can auditor afford to have a lesser sample size? So the answer is what? Yes. Is it clear? Is it clear? So this is the sixth part, and many of you, Bhardwaj, Aditi, Himanshu, Hitesh, then Pooja. ठीक है, very good. ठीक है, have you understood the point, the concept also? है ना? यहाँ पे 100 select करता auditor without stratifying, chances are there all 100 comes out of one area. So the sample will not be representative of the population. Na? So in order to reduce the sampling risk, auditor may decide here in this situation to take a larger sample size. Vis-a-vis a situation whereby he's dividing, he's stratifying the population and then he's picking the sample from each stratum. So since the variability reduces, the sampling risk will also reduce and the sample can be reduced. And last, the number of sampling units in the population, and the answer is the same. That is what? In small population mein it is recommended not to use audit sampling, and in case of large population it is going to have what? A negligible effect. Negligible effect. Clear? Is it clear? Now what is the third point? I'll explain it again. Okay. And Hiral, I think this was the fourth point in test of control which you were asking. Okay. I'm repeating this third point. With respect to test of details, an increase in the auditor's desired level of assurance that tolerable misstatement is not exceeded by actual misstatement in the population. So let's say when the auditor started the audit procedures with respect to trade receivables amounting to, let's say the total amount is 1 crore. Auditor decided his tolerable level that up to 5 lakhs. If there is a misstatement, it is not as such material for me. I will tolerate it. Okay? But beyond 5 lakhs, I will not tolerate it. Such level is called what? Tolerable level of misstatement. Clear hai? Itna to clear hai? ठीक है. Now auditor wants an assurance. He wants a confidence कि ऐसा ना हो that the actual misstatement exceeds this level. So I told you where the auditor needs more confidence, ask him to perform more work. Ask him to take a larger sample size. ठीक है Hiral, is it clear? Point number 3rd of test of details and point number 4th of internal control are same. So I hope Hiral your doubts are clear. So yes, for the 6th point, Dhanya Lakshmi, so 6th point is case number B basically. Hana? So basically increase in sample size or a larger sample size. So I've created 2 situations that in A situation, maybe a higher sample size will be opted by the auditor. But when he stratifies, which is the situation which is mentioned in the factors. Hana? So this is what? Case B. Okay, Dhanya Lakshmi, is this clear? I hope this concept of sample size is clear to all of you. Quickly, I need your replies. I've drafted it in a tabular format. This entire concept is given in the module in paragraph forms and the reasoning is also mentioned there. So if any doubt is still there, you can ask me and you should also go through the reasoning, the explanation that is given in your module. Quickly, I wait for 10 seconds. Quickly send in your reply whether you have understood the concept of sample size, whereby we have understood that size, the sample size, it can be based on statistical formula, it can be based on what? Professional judgment of the auditor. But there are certain factors that have an effect on the sample size and we divide it into 2 parts, that is for test of controls and for the test of details. And very important from the point of view of your MCQs, true, false, descriptive, anything, and true, false to definitely can come. Dhanya Lakshmi is saying, explain me stratification wala concept. See, try to understand. If there are 10,000 vouchers of trade receivables, okay, and there are 4 products, or let's say this is sales of 4 products, A, B, C, D, okay. Auditor has to draw a sample of 1,000, or we took example of what, 100 now there. So auditor has to draw a sample of 100. Okay? Now, if auditor is drawing the sample from this 10,000, he draws a sample of 100 invoices. So chances are there that out of this 100, he may get maximum of A, maximum of B. Let's say C is not at all covered, D is not at all covered. Or anyways, like it might be possible that C is out of 100, C के 15 voices आ जाते हैं, D के भी 50 आ जाते हैं और इनके नहीं आते. In such a situation, this sample of 100 is not a representative of this 10,000, huh? Because 10,000 consists of A, B, C and D. Clear? इतना समझ आता है? Now, let's take a situation whereby auditor stratifies this data A, B, C, D, and out of each population, let's say the population consists of 2,500 invoices each. Auditor takes a sample of 25 from each of this subpopulation stratum. Now tell me, this 100 is definitely a representative of what? This entire population. Why? Because now samples are drawn from what? The stratas. And students, basically what will auditor do? Whatever results he'll get for this 25, he will proportion it to what? This 2,500. जो B product के लिए result आएगा sample पे, he will proportionate it for this 2,500, accordingly C के लिए, accordingly D के लिए, and then he will combine all these 4 products projections to come to a conclusion about the projection on 10,000 items. ठीक है? Now in such a situation, देखो यहाँ पर auditor might feel कि ठीक है मेरे को 200 invoices ले जाता हूँ in order to be sure that this is not happening. But here, since stratification is done, so there is a decrease in the sample size, though sampling risk is not increasing. ठीक है? Is it clear? Is it clear? So, Hiral, with respect to your query, she is saying that with respect to correct and incorrect, how to write the answers. So, Hiral, what I have done today is, in your answer sheet, with respect to chapter number 7, Hana, I have uploaded it, the descriptive question, MCQs, true, false, and answers. And in the answers, I have given you the reasoning also. So, you can go through the reasoning of those true, correct and incorrect, which I have uploaded on the system. Okay? Is it clear? Chalo, theek hai. Now, the next topic is sample selection. Just a minute. Selection of items for testing. ठीक है? तो अभी तक हमने क्या किया? Sample design किया. जहां पे we saw that we need to have an understanding of the purpose, the audit procedures, the audit evidence, population characteristics, whether it is complete. In order to understand the population characteristics, stratification is there and value-weighted selection is there. Then we understood what sample size. Sample size ke liye what we saw, that there can be statistical based formula, there can be professional judgment, but there are certain factors which we have just discussed in detail. Now the third step is selection of items for testing. That is, now auditor has made a plan for obtaining sample from the population. He has also decided the sample size. Now, how to select the items for testing is our next step. Okay? So first and foremost, we all know that sample, the items of the sample should be such that they should represent the population, and each sampling unit in the population should have a chance of selection. That is what, there should be no bias. And for this reason, statistical sampling, which is based on probability, this is what suggested. Okay. However, in non-statistical sampling, see SA 530, the scope extends to both statistical and non-statistical. Statistical, mein, there will be no personal bias. Each and every item sampling unit will have an equal chance of selection. But non-statistical is also used. You may ask that, ma'am, why auditor will use non-statistical? See, it is simple now. It is easy to use. It is cost effective. है ना, कोई ट्रेनिंग थोड़ी ना देना है किसी को. बट स्टैटिस्टिकल के लिए तो यू नीड टू नो द फॉर्मूले. The team needs to know, they need to get the training, you need to have the softwares now. So this is the reason why non-statistical sampling is also used, and more specifically in case of smaller organization. Okay? So auditor's judgment is used. Okay? But SA 530 says that since a reasonable basis is required to draw a conclusion, auditor, when he's applying his professional judgment, he should be sure that the sample is representative of the population, and the bias, the factor of bias should be avoided. Okay? Auditor should not be biased in selecting the samples, items for sample. Now, there are 5 methods which are discussed in your module, which are what? Random selection, sampling, systematic sampling, monetary unit sampling, haphazard sampling, and block sampling. Okay? Okay? Now, for all those, I think Karthik and one more student was there who was asking me to explain stratification and value-weighted selection again. I will be repeating those methods here. Okay? Yahan pe you will be able to understand those concepts clearly. So, please be with me and listen to me carefully. So, there are 5 methods of sample selection methods. Very, very important. You may get a descriptive question. You may get MCQ. You may get true, false. And today, and in fact, today the case studies that we'll be discussing, if time will permit us, those are totally based on these methods. Okay? You may get a case scenario as to, with respect to conducting the audit of a company, the auditor has decided to apply audit sampling. With respect to traveling, he is performing this method. Okay? With respect to power and fuel expenses, he is performing this type of sampling. So you may get MCQ as to, with respect to traveling, what method is being followed. The procedure will be mentioned in the case study. You will have to name the method in the question MCQ. Okay? So very important. So first is what? Random sampling. So we'll start with the first one, random sampling. Quickly send in your replies. What do you understand by term random? Send in your replies. I'm waiting for your replies. Pooja, this theory is absolutely used in auditing. And a statistical sampling, the methods which will be used, which we'll be discussing, Abhina, these are used when you will be conducting the audit. Hana? There may be a difference that in case of large organization, the big fours, some statistical methods are only used. With respect to audit of small companies, professional judgment is used. But you will see that these methods are actually are practically implemented when you will be conducting the audit. Okay. Now try to understand. See, in simple term, I can say it is a kind of lucky draw. Random sampling is of two types: simple random sampling and stratified random sampling. And what is random sampling? It is a kind of what? Lucky draw. That any of the, let's say, purchase or sales invoices, any of these will be selected. Okay? Now, such selection can be done with the use of random number tables. Okay? There are many apps available whereby you can generate random numbers. There are various softwares also whereby random numbers are generated. And if you all know, in Excel also you can generate a random number, like by entering the formula rand between, you can get the random numbers. Okay? Let us just see as to how to obtain random number using an app. Okay? We will practically do it. As who was asking, ma'am, can this practically be done? Yes, it can be done. So what is basically random selection? So the auditor is selecting the invoices for sample as sample item for performing audit procedures on them on random basis. Okay? He will not apply his professional judgment. He will apply certain tools to pick up the vouchers, because professional judgment aayega to personal bias can come. Hana? So he's applying various tools like random number tables can come, or simply what can be done is in a bowl there is a slip of 1 to 1000 invoices 1 to 1000. Okay? And he can just pick up the chits from the bowl and he can see, okay, these are the numbers that he has selected. So he will check all those invoices. Let us just have a look at an app. Okay? So you all can also do. So what I have done in Google, I have just simply written what? Random number generator. Okay? So there are apps which are available. So let's say, students, my invoice number is from 1 to, let's say, 1000. Okay? And I want to generate a sample of, let's say, 200 units. Allow duplication? No, I don't want to get a duplication. Do you want to sort the results? Let's say yes, in ascending order, sort the result. And I want integers, not decimal. Clear? So this is what? An app which will generate random number. So I have mentioned that for the invoices numbering from 1 to 1000, I want a sample of 200 invoices on random basis. I hope the screen is clear to all of you. Now generate. See, this app has automatically taken out 200, randomly picked up 200 invoices. I'll do one thing for a better understanding. Let us reduce this number to 20 only, so that, or 10. So I want a smaller sample size. Okay? Duplicates are not required in ascending order, and I want integers to generate. So these are the 10 numbers. Now my professional judgment is not involved here. Now, in the last session, someone of you was saying that, ma'am, if you will feed the data in the system and then random numbers will get generated, then you may be biased in feeding the data. See, what is the biasness here? Now, I've just mentioned that from invoice number 1 to invoice number 1000, system, please give me a sample of 10 invoices. System has given me 10 invoices on a very random basis. My professional judgment, my biasness is not involved. Now what I'll do, suppose this was the invoices with, let's say these were the sale invoices. I got these 10. I'm not able to write here. I got these 10 numbers. Hana, now I will give this list to the management. That management, with respect to these 10 items, these 10 sale invoices numbering 113, 161, 398, 595, give me the entire documentation. I'm going to check them in detail. Are you able to understand? See, out of 1000, let's say I'm taking a sample of 10. I'm using a random number table here, or a software which gives me random number. Same way, random numbers can be generated in Excel also. ठीक है. Is it clear the concept of random number? Is it clear how to generate random numbers? And for the student who was asking me whether ma'am practically this can be done, so see, we have done it practically, that yes, it can be done. Quickly send in your reply. समझ आया इतना? Students, send in your replies quickly. A lot of topic is to be covered, and I want to discuss with you the example of stratification and value weighted also for your better understanding. So unless and until you will send in your replies quickly, we won't be able to do that. ठीक है. So random sampling. ठीक है. So randomly I'm selecting, and simple random sampling, which we have just seen, that it is a kind of lucky draw only. ठीक है. So I may use these tools. I may use a drum with chits. All the chits are put in there, and I may select the numbers. It is as simple as that. Okay? Now, stratified sampling. Now I have explained it to you in detail. है ना? अच्छे से explain किया है ना? That out of 10,000, so simple random sampling में तो क्या होगा? Out of this 10,000 ना, I'll be mentioning that from 1 to 10,000, give me a sample of 100. ठीक है? Clear? In stratified, I will be first dividing my population in A, B, C, D 4 parts. And then let's say these are 2,500 invoices. Then I'll ask the computer that from 1 to 2,500, give me a lot of sample. From this one, let's say this is 1A to 2,500A, give me another sample. For C, give me another sample. For D, give me another sample. Stratified. Let us have a look at the example for stratification. Just a minute. For all those who are having the doubts from the last session. So, just a minute. So, see, let's say there are sales, 10,000 transactions are there. Okay? So, one way is what? Simple random sampling. Then that out of this 10,000, I'm selecting a sample of what? 1,000. How will that be done? Let us go back to this. So I will tell the system that from 1 to 10,000, I have invoices. I need a sample of 1,000 here. Or here 100 is only possible. Okay? And generate it for me. So I'll get an entire list. Okay? Of all the invoices so selected. So this is one method. Okay? What is stratification now? Random stratified sampling. Let's say this is a company which is manufacturing pen, pencil, eraser, and ruler. Okay? The pen, pencil, and eraser are sold in the local market. However, ruler, the scale are also exported. Okay? Now, see, when I take a sample of 1,000 without dividing the population, it might be possible that out of this 1,000, 700 comes from pen, 300 is coming from eraser. I'm not getting any data for pencil. I'm not getting any data for ruler. It might be possible. Okay? In such a situation, this 1,000 is not a true representative of this 10,000. Why? Because 10,000 is made up of what? All 4 items. So what is a technique available? It is what? Stratification. So what I'll do here, I will divide the heterogeneous population. Heterogeneous is different population in subpopulation. Homogeneous. Homogeneous is what? Similar subpopulation based on certain characteristics. So I divided this 10,000 based on the characteristic that this is pen which is sold in local market. तो characteristic है ना कि pen है और local market है, pencil है local market में है, eraser है local market में sale है, and ruler है जो कि export होता है. So I've divided this heterogeneous population into homogeneous subpopulation. This process is called what? Stratification. Okay? This process is called stratification. Just a minute. And these are called what? Stratum, subpopulation. Stratum or what? Subpopulation. I divided the heterogeneous, different population into homogeneous stratum, subpopulation. Okay? And let's say this 10,000 transactions invoices, it consists of what? 3,000 invoices of pen sales, 2,000 invoices for sale of pencil, 1,000 invoices for sale of eraser, and 4,000 invoices for export of rulers. Now, these individual units in each stratum is what? Strata. ये जितने भी invoices हैं in each subpopulation are called what? Strata. Okay, now how stratification will be done? Now I will ask the system that out of this 1 to 3,000 invoices, give me a sample of 300. I will ask the system now, give me a sample. Let's say whatever is the number of the invoices from 1 to 2,000, give me a sample of 200. Here give me a sample of 100 and here give me a sample of 400. And then I'll obtain same sample. 1,000 sample is there, but now it is what? Stratified. It represents the population in a better way. It truly represents the population. Why? Because 10,000 consists of all these 4 items, and now my sample consists of all these 4 items. Now, whatever result I get on this sample related to pen, I will project it on my population related to pen only. If I say that there is a misstatement of 10%, so I'll say that there is a mistake of 10% in this 3,000. I'll not say that on the entire population. So I'll project it on the subpopulation. Okay? Same way, if I say there is a mistake of 5% here, so I'll project it on this 2,000, not 10,000. Same way, this misstatement will be projected here and this misstatement will be projected here, and then a combined assessment of the 10,000 items which are divided into 4 groups, 4 subpopulation, that will give me a conclusion about the entire population. So this is the process of stratification, whereby we have understood that stratification may be done based on any criteria. It can be like region wise, it can be product wise, it can be with respect to trade receivable. If you remember, we saw that it can be done as per the age of the trade receivable also. Okay? And it may be done with respect to the values. Kaise? Let's say, suppose there is trade receivables co-auditor is conducting audit sampling on trade receivables. So trade receivables starting from 5,000 to 10 lakhs are there. This is what rupees. Now, if I select a sample out of this, let's say these are again 10,000 transactions. I take a sample of 1,000. It might be possible that I am selecting only, I may get only the lower value item. Okay? So what as an auditor I can do, what I can do is I may divide it as from 500 to let's say 10,000, there is one group. From 10,001 to let's say 2 lakhs, there is another group. From 2 lakh 1 to let's say 5 lakhs, there is another group. From 5 lakhs 1 to 7 lakhs, there is another group. And from 7 lakh 1 to 10 lakhs, there is another group. And now I may take 100% of these items because these are high value items. I may take, let's say here I'm doing 100% checking. Here I'm taking a sample of let's say 25%. Here I'm taking a sample of let's say 10%, 5%, 1%. Okay? So this is the way stratification is done. Okay? Okay? So I hope you are able to understand. See, calculations won't be required as such, but this is definitely going to give you a better insight as to how the sampling is done. So random number selection is clear. You can download any app on your mobile. You can just Google on your laptop and you can just generate the numbers. So if you're generating the number from the system, you are feeding the data, but your personal bias, factor of personal bias is not there. ठीक है. And how stratification done? It is done in this way, and it is always better कि 10,000 में से sample draw करो या stratify करके sample draw करो. This is going to reduce the sampling risk if you stratify in an appropriate way. ठीक है. I hope it is clear. I hope it is clear. Please send in your replies. Value weighted also we will discuss. Karthik, please wait. ठीक है. I need your replies for stratification process and random selection. ठीक है. Now, so we have done what? We have done random selection, whereby we saw it is what is possible. Simple random sampling is also possible, and stratified sampling is also possible. ठीक है. I will be taking you through the module once I complete all the methods. ठीक है. Now this next is what? Interval sampling. Interval sampling, or also called what? Systematic sampling. So another way is what? Interval or systematic sampling. ठीक है. So let's say again, let's take an example. The entire set of trade receivable, it consists of, let's say, 10,000 invoices. ठीक है. Now let's say I want a sample size of 200 invoices. So interval sampling says that auditor, you calculate an interval, that whatever invoice will be there at this interval, you will select it as a sample. That is, divide this population by the sample size that you need. So 50, Hana. So every 50th item is your sample now. Every 50th item in this 10,000 population is your sample now. The first item that auditor will select using his professional judgment, ki theek hai, I'll select from the 10th item. So 10th plus 50th item, so 60th. Plus 50, 100, 10th item. So these will become what? The sample units. The units that will be included in the sample. समझ आ गया? एक interval. Systematically we will derive a sample. How? By obtaining an interval. कैसे calculate करना? Simple है कि कितनी population है? 10,000 है. कितना sample size चाहिए? 200 चाहिए. Divided it by 200, you will get your sampling interval. Now, whatever item will come on the 50th number is the part of your sample. Clear? Is it clear? Okay. Now, I told you that first item, auditor may select on random basis. Any random basis पे कहीं से भी start कर लो, 100th item के बाद start कर लो. तो every 150th item, every 200th item, then 250th item. That ways the sample will be decided. ठीक है. Now let's say auditor decides that 50th item is my unit of units that will be selected for sample, but the data is so selected that, let's say, the population is so arranged that every 50th item happens to be a particular branch invoice. ऐसा हो सकता है ना, that branch invoice, that if, let's say, there is a list 1, 2, 3 till 50th, this is some X branch invoice. Same way, 100th item is also again X branch invoice. There may be a set pattern. So systematic sampling, it says that in this case, in order to avoid such situation, what you can do is you can take multiple starting points. Starting points. That is, let's say यहाँ पर first वाला starting point लिया था, उसके बाद you kept on adding 50th. After that, you may take another starting point that at 1000 or let's say 1200th item, I will now start again. ठीक है, यहाँ से products, यहाँ से invoices ले लिए, at the 2000th item, I'll now start again. ठीक है, so the chances of a particular item being selected again and again will be avoided. ठीक है, or let's say if auditor, he decides that okay, with every alternate month, I will be conducting the sampling, checking on sampling basis. कि let's say another example, April, May, June, July. So auditor says that every alternate month I'll be taking up the invoices for checking on sampling basis. But it so happens that accountant X is making the invoices in June, in April, and accountant Y is making the invoices in May and July. Now, though the method is systematic, है ना, auditor ने तो systematically decide किया ना that every alternate month पे I'll do the checking, but every alternate month पे invoices prepared by only X will come or only Y will come. So auditor needs to consider these points when he is applying what? Interval sampling. Clear है? So let us just have a look at the module जितना भी हमने किया है. Then I'll take you through the further methods. So we did random sampling and systematic sampling. So see, random sampling. So random selection is what ensures that all items within stratum have known chance of population using of random number tables. Simple random sampling. Under this method, each unit of the whole population, that is purchases or sales, these have an equal chance of selection. Auditor's bias does not affect the selection. Each item in the population is selected by use of random number table with the help of computer, the way we did, picking up a number in a random way, maybe randomly from a drum, like chit system. Today, random numbers are also generated using various applications on cell phones. ठीक है? But random sampling, simple random sampling is more suitable for what? Homogeneous population. है ना? Homogeneous is what? Similar population. A very important question for your true, false or MCQ. ठीक है? Stratified sampling. This method involves dividing the whole population to be tested in few groups called strata and taking a sample from each of them. It should be what? Stratum. Each stratum is treated as a separate subpopulation and if proportionate of items are selected from each of these. For example, like this. See this paragraph na, it beautifully explains this concept. It says, देखो, divide किया population को. From these above groups, the auditor may pick up different percentages of item from each group. From the top group was what? This one. Balances in excess of 10 lakhs. Auditor may examine all the items. From the second group, 25% of the items. From the third group, 10% of the items. From the lowest group, 2%. Random sampling is chosen from each stratum using random number table. And it is, reasoning behind is what? For a highly diversified different population. ठीक है? Clear है? तो simple random sampling किसके लिए? Homogeneous population. And stratified sampling इसके लिए है for highly diversified. What is stratification? देखो, dividing heterogeneous, different, diversified population into homogeneous, similar characteristics. जैसे था ना pen, pencil, eraser, ruler. Subpopulation where samples are drawn from each subpopulation. Is it clear? ठीक है? Interval sampling. Systematic sampling is selection method in which number of sampling units in the population, that is the entire population 10,000, is divided by sample size. तो हमारा sample size क्या था? We needed a sample of 200, है ना? For example, 50. So, having determined the starting point, auditor can determine it on a random basis. Within first 50, each 50th item unit thereafter will be selected. Although starting point may be determined haphazardly, the sample is more likely to be a truly random. पर ऑडिटर को क्या ध्यान रखना है? When using systematic selection, the auditor will need to determine that the sampling units within the population are not structured in such a way that sampling interval corresponds to a particular pattern. That every 50th item consists of what? Sales to branch X. तो ऐसे तो और कोई data auditor will not get ना. Clear? So this is explained here. You can read it. And accountant wala. See, if accountant A is responsible to record all transaction in a particular month and accountant B for the next month, if this structure is same throughout the year and auditor determines as his sample to check every transaction of alternate months, तो या तो वो A को check कर पाएगा या B को check कर पाएगा. So auditor needs to consider this. Clear है? Is it clear? क्लियर? ठीक है. नाउ मॉनिटरी यूनिट सैम्पलिंग. देखो यहाँ पे व्हाट वी आर डूइंग इज सिलेक्शन ऑफ आइटम. सो वी आर अप्लाइंग व्हाट? मॉनिटरी यूनिट. ठीक है. या यहाँ पे ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस इज व्हाट? सिलेक्शन ऑफ आइटम्स यूजिंग स्ट्रैटिफाइड सैम्पलिंग. एंड वी हैव डन दिस टॉपिक अर्लियर ऑल्सो, स्ट्रैटिफिकेशन, है ना. लेट मी जस्ट टेक यू थ्रू दैट टॉपिक. बट वो हमने कहाँ पढ़ा था? When the auditor is what? Considering the characteristics of the population. तो जब आप सैंपल डिजाइन कर रहे हो, when you are understanding the characteristics of the population ना, तो ऑडिटर उसको let's say stratification. तो you do one thing, you divide the population and then try to understand the characteristics. ठीक है? So when the auditor is designing the sample, so SA 530 says that in order to understand the characteristics of the population now, first stratify, classify it and then try to understand that ठीक है, पेन की जो सेल्स है वो लोकल सेल्स है, इसके ऊपर जीएसटी इतना लगता है. रूलर की जो सेल है वो एक्सपोर्ट्स है, एक्सपोर्ट्स में प्राइस इतना होता है, फ्लक्चुएशन रेट इतना होता है. So there are different type of risk associated with the different products now. Different rates are there, different taxes are there. So that is why we are studying this concept again, because यहाँ पर क्या बोला हुआ है? When you are understanding the characteristics of the population, तो उसको stratify करके पढ़ो. And here SA 530 says when you are now selecting the items ना, तब भी stratify कर लो. The method is going to be the same. Is it clear? Who was asking this doubt? Karthik, is it clear? ठीक है, समझ आते हैं? Now let us see and look at the third method and you will be able to understand value weighted selection in a better way. देखो third method क्या है? Monetary unit sampling. Monetary unit sampling, and it is same as our value weighted selection. It is a type of value weighted selection in which sample size selection evaluation result is in a conclusion in monetary amount. ठीक है, ये सेम हमने कहाँ पढ़ा था? Let us just have a look. So where are we? Sample design. See, in value weighted selection, you have studied the same point. In value weighted selection, the sample size, its selection, evaluation will result in conclusion in monetary amounts. ठीक है? So methods will be same, but here we are understanding the characteristics of the population, and there we are selecting the items for testing by applying what? The method is called what? Monetary unit. And here it is what? Value weighted selection. Clear? Hai? Now, how to use it? So students, with respect to value weighted selection, instead of selecting or instead of understanding the population, like there are 1,000 invoices, with respect to trade receivable, auditor, he will be selecting or he will be understanding in terms of monetary units. That, let's say, see, value weighted selection, that the auditor is selecting by giving weights to the value of the transaction. He is not concerned with invoice number. Okay? He is not concerned with the customer as such. He is concerned with the value of the invoice. He is concerned with what? Value. So he is attaching weights to what? Value. Ki value of the invoice ke according he is picking up the sample. So let's try to understand this again with the help of example. And here I am assuming that you all are aware about the statistical method that we'll be discussing here. So let's say the sales are rupees 10,000. So this is not number. This is what? Rupees. Okay? And students value weighted selection. This method is done along with systematic method, which we have just done. That is whereby interval is decided. तो वहां पर हमने interval कैसे decide किया था? Every 50th item, and that 50th item was what? Invoice number. So here also we'll be deciding the interval, but here the item will be what? The nth item will be what? The value. So suppose sample required is of 5. 5 samples are required. So what will be the sample interval? Rupees 10,000. The 10,000 is divided by 5. That is 200th interval. 2,000, sorry. Okay? Now, what will be our population here? The sale value of the invoices. One sale value is 1,000. One is 2,000. One is 500, 1,100, 3,000. The total becomes what? 10,000. Okay? Now, auditor has decided that 5 sample is to be taken and interval will be what? Every 2,000 item. So let's say he decides first item to be 50. So 50 will fall here. Here I have calculated what? Cumulative sales value. 50th will fall here. So he will take this as one of the sample. So this is what? A value. The value of the invoice is what? 1,000. This is not the invoice number. Then adding 2,000 to it, 2050. So 2050 will come here. So he will take 2,000, the invoice having a value of 2,000 as another sample. Again 2,000, then it becomes what? 4050. This way auditor will be selecting what? 5 samples. Okay, you all have done this method now. Cumulative sales value are calculated and interval is calculated by dividing this 10,000 rupees by the desired sample size. So every 2,000th item is coming. Okay? So this way all these samples will come. Now if you just have a look that when auditor has selected the 5 samples, the value is what? 7,600. So just by checking 5 invoices having the value of 7,600, whatever conclusion he'll draw about this sample, he will project it on the entire sample of 10,000. Is it clear? So here I'm not saying that I want to have what? I want to see, check the or have the invoice of sample of 5 invoices, or I want this invoice or that invoice. Like I'm not identifying it by the invoice number, but by what? Invoice value. So value has been given weightage, and you will see by applying this method, the transaction of higher values will get selected. Okay? So this is a statistical method whereby higher values will get selected, and the entire thing, that is selection of the sample, evaluation of the sample. What is the evaluation? That if out of rupees 7,600, let's say there is a mistake of, let's say 76 rupees, then out of 10,000, how much will be the mistake? And the projection evaluation is also in terms of what? Value. Okay? Now we will do one thing. We will just have a look at this method from the module C. When performing test of details, it may be efficient to identify sampling unit as the individual monetary unit. That is, each rupees is an individual monetary unit. ठीक है, that make up the population. Having selected specific monetary units from the population, for example, accounts receivable, the auditor may examine the particular items, the individual balances. See here, auditor has decided the interval now. Based on the calculations he has selected, just a minute, he has selected the individual values that I will check these. Yes, invoice value is taken directly and cumulatively I have added. See, 1000 plus 2000 is what? 3000. Then 3000 plus 500 is 3500. So I cumulatively added the sales value. Okay. One of the benefit of this approach to defining sampling unit is that audit effort is directed towards larger value items. See, we selected only 5 samples now, and we have a value of what? 7600 out of 10,000. Because they have a greater chance of selection, this approach is used in conjunction with systematic method of selection. That is, interval we calculated now. But instead of dividing the number of invoices by the requisite sample size, I'm dividing the value of the population with the requisite sample size. In value-weighted selection, the sample size, the selection, the evaluation will result in conclusion in monetary amounts. That is, I will not say here that if out of 10,000 invoices, there is a mistake in 2 invoices, or let's say out of 10,000, a sample of 1000 is selected and there is a mistake of 200 in 1000 invoice, then how much will be a mistake in 10,000? What I'll be saying, out of rupees 10,000, I've selected a sample of rupees 1000. There is a mistake of rupees 200 in rupees 10,000 invoice, then how much will be the mistake in invoices worth rupees 10,000? So everything is in what? Monetary amounts. Okay? Auditor, here an auditor may take it on a random basis. Na? First point though, you have seen in systematic sampling that auditor may select it as per his wish. Okay? Is it clear? Is it clear? So as such, students, these calculations are not required. But in order to understand the concept, it will give you a better understanding. So value weighted selection में क्या किया? We have given weights to what? Values. है ना? कि इतना value का अगर invoice है ना, तो उसमें I need 5 samples. So at every 2000th item, so whatever value invoice will come, है ना? Whatever the invoice having the value that is selected, that will be checked on a sample basis. Clear? Is it clear? Aditi, yes. If you do not stratify the population, though stratification is appropriate, then you will not get good results. Hana? Because there is variability. See, it is mentioned here also. See, audit efficiency with respect to stratification. Audit efficiency may be improved if auditor stratifies the population. Okay? So Karthik is saying concept is clear, but I need more of your replies, whether you are able to understand or not. So we have done what? Monetary unit. And now if many of you will ask me, ma'am, why we are reading it again? Because there, SA 530 says that auditor, when you are understanding the characteristics of the population, na, आप उसको या तो stratify कर लो या value weighted कर लो. And here we are saying when you're selecting the sample, you may do it on random sampling, which can be stratified also. You may do it using monetary unit sampling, which is what? Value weighted selection. Clear? Now the fourth, haphazard sampling. Quickly send in your reply. What is meant by haphazard? Haphazard. Quickly send in your replies. I'll complete these 2 methods, then we will take a break. So haphazard is what? Unorganized. Unsystematic. ठीक है? which is not well defined. So here auditor is not using random table. Auditor is not applying the professional judgment. Hana? He's just picking up the invoices. Like how? So basically, see, when auditor is using random number tables, so the work of selecting randoms has been done by the tool. Clear? When auditor is applying his professional judgment, so he's applying his judgment na ki okay, this is the invoice, Hana, whereby the value is this. Based on my previous experience, I'll select this. So professional judgment, he's applying his mind, right? But in haphazard, he's just looking at the invoice number. Okay, 10, I'll check. 50th, I will check. 70th, I'll check. 100th, I'll check. He's not aware as to what is there in 50th. Haphazard way, unstructured, unorganized way. Okay? Tell me, is it appropriate when you are using statistical sampling? No. So haphazard selection is not appropriate. So haphazard sampling has no structured approach, does not involve judgment, and does not even use the random number table. So you may, I'm repeating it again. Many of the students have a doubt that ma'am professional judgment to rahega na? Nahi. Professional judgment mein to kya ho raha hai? Auditor is applying his mind here. Professional judgment. Ki okay, this is a higher value item, I'll select it. Last year in this party there was a problem, I'll select it. Idhar kya ho raha hai? Auditor is just having a look at the invoice number ki 10, 50, 70, 100, 200. No professional judgment. Hana? So haphazard selection in which auditor selects the sample without following a structured technique. Clear? And it has no structured approach, does not involve judgment, does not use the random number table the way he wish without applying the professional judgment. Okay? So with this we have covered fourth. Now is what? Block sampling. Very simple. Block sampling, as the name suggests, block sampling. So auditor will be selecting blocks of contiguous. Contiguous is what? Adjacent, continuous items. For example, he may say that, okay, I'm checking the sales invoices. So I'll check them for the month of January. All sales invoices for the month of January I'll pick up. And I'll check all sales invoices for the month of October. So he has taken a block, January ka block, October ka block, and he's checking all those invoices. So it is also not a good method. Now, why? Because it might happen that January and October ka checking he has done, but in the other months, May, June, July, September, August, there is some problem. But this is also one of the system of methods of sample selection. Okay? So he may take first 200 sales invoices from sales day in the month of September. Alternatively, ya kya kar sakta hai? He may form a cluster like 4 blocks of 15 invoices. Ki every week I need 15 invoices from every week. Okay? So there is a close similarity between this method and non-statistical. There is no statistics involved, na? It is simple. It is like no training is required, but risk of bias is always there. And it might be possible that pattern of selection may be noted by the auditees. Auditees as in the client. They may know na ki acha ye wala jo auditor hai, ye to first 100 invoices ही check करता है. So we will give a list of invoice accordingly कि first 100 में there is no problem. ठीक है? Simple है. Block. Clear? So with this, we have done 3 steps of the sampling process. We started with sample design. We did sample size, whereby we discussed various factors, if you remember, and sample selection mein we have done what? 5 methods. And I hope all of your queries related to earlier topic, that is stratification and value weighted, is now clear. Okay? So quickly send in your replies, clear hai ya nahi? And now here we will take a break of 10 minutes. Be back after sharp 10 minutes because I need to finish the course. I need to discuss the question. I need to discuss the case study also. Okay? So take a break of 10 minutes here and send in your replies whether everything is clear or not. Thank you. Take a break. So students, I hope you all are back after the break. So now we are starting with topics. Students, your doubts I'll be taking later on. Okay, because number of topics which are very, very important. Many of these topics are left. These are small topics. So let us just finish these topics. Then I'll be taking up all your queries. So be with me. So the next topic is sampling risk and non-sampling risk. Okay? Very simple. Sampling risk, as the name suggests, the risk associated with sampling activity is what? Sampling risk. Risk is what? Something which is not wanted here. Hana? Risk, if you remember, I have explained you the concept of risk in chapter number 4. Remember? If any one of you remember, please send in your replies. Risk. A possibility of something unpleasant. है ना, सैम्पलिंग करते हुए कुछ अनप्लेजेंट हो जाता है, बाय बिकॉज यू आर डूइंग सैम्पलिंग, दैट इज व्हाट सैम्पलिंग रिस्क. ठीक है. सो व्हाट इज द डेफिनेशन? इट बेसिकली सेज दैट we will first try to understand this with the help of this definition, that whatever audit procedures auditor has applied on the sample. So I've made this as a population. Out of this population, sample is selected. Okay? Whatever audit procedures auditor applied on the sample, and he drew certain conclusion. है ना, conclusion ही तो draw करना था ना. If you remember objective, what was the objective? To draw a reasonable conclusion about the population by using sampling. यही तो objective था ना इससे 530 का. So whatever conclusion auditor has drawn by applying audit procedure to sample, if this conclusion is different from the conclusion that he would have drawn if he would have applied these audit procedure on the entire population. अगर 100% चेकिंग करता ना ऑडिटर तो कंक्लूजन कुछ और आता, और अब सैम्पलिंग करने की वजह से कंक्लूजन कुछ और है. देयर इज अ डिफरेंस. ठीक है. सो लेट्स से बेस्ड ऑन सैंपल ऑडिटर इज सेइंग दैट द ट्रैवलिंग एक्सपेंसेस, he checked the traveling bills on sample basis, and based on sample checking he concluded that the traveling bills, they do not contain a material misstatement. Though if auditor would have checked the entire set of traveling bills, then in such a situation auditor would have given a conclusion that traveling bills are in fact materially misstated. ठीक है. वाई? बिकॉज ऐसा हो सकता है ना कि जो सैंपल सिलेक्ट किए, दीज 5 सैंपल्स, दे डू नॉट कंटेन अ मिसस्टेटमेंट, बट लेट्स से दीज आर 20. ठीक है, ये पॉपुलेशन 20 की है. लेट्स से 5 सैंपल्स दे डू नॉट कंटेन, बट द रिमेनिंग 15 हैड दैट मिसस्टेटमेंट. सो रिस्क विल ऑलवेज बी देयर ना. ठीक है. सो रिस्क दैट ऑडिटर्स कंक्लूजन बेस्ड ऑन अ सैंपल, based on this sample may be different from the conclusion if the entire population were subjected to the same audit procedure. So if the entire population was subjected to the same audit procedure same है, वही audit procedures अगर population पे करते तो कुछ और conclusion आता vis-a-vis जब वो audit procedures हमने कहाँ किए हैं? On the sample. Clear? ठीक है. So let us have a look at this definition again. So risk, that the auditor's conclusion based on the sample may be different from the conclusion if the entire population were subjected to the same audit procedure. I gave you example कि traveling bills जो हैं, they were, let's say for simplicity, let's say they were 20 in number. ठीक है. And auditor selected 5 out of these. In these 5 there was no mistake, so he said that traveling bills do not contain a material misstatement. Though the fact is that in the remaining 15 there is a material misstatement. So this risk will always exist ना, ऐसा तो हो ही सकता है ना. This is one of the inherent limitations of sampling ना. ठीक है. Now tell me, what will auditor try? He will try to what? He will try to increase sampling risk or reduce sampling risk. Quickly, I need answers. Increase or decrease? Reduce or increase? He will always try to reduce the sampling risk to an acceptably low level. And how will that be possible? We have done by taking a larger sample size. Sampling to kar lo na auditor, because inherent limitations of audit hai, time and cost are involved, so 100% checking is not possible. But apply your professional judgment, take a larger sample size wherever it is required so that you can reduce the sampling risk to an acceptably low level. Okay? Now, see, I have told you that let us try to understand this. See, sampling risk क्या होता है समझ आया? He will try to reduce the sampling risk. How? By increasing the sample size. ठीक है? Now I told you that traveling bills हैं 20 number. This is what population. Auditor ने sample लिया of 5 units. He checked those 5 units. Now there can be two possibilities. First can be what? When he checked these 5 bills, he concluded that they do not contain material misstatement. ठीक है? They do not contain material misstatement. Though, in fact, what is the situation? That in the remaining 15, there is a material misstatement. ठीक है? But since auditor has concluded, can I say that there is incorrect acceptance of material misstatement? He is over-relying. There is incorrect acceptance of material misstatement because based on the sample, auditor has concluded that there is no material misstatement. So is incorrectly accepting the material misstatement of the remaining 15. Clear? On the other hand, there can be a situation that in these 5, auditor concludes that there is a material misstatement. And in fact, the material misstatement was in those 5 only, and remaining 15 are absolutely free from material misstatement. But since auditor feels that he has concluded that there is a material misstatement in these 5, he will draw an overall conclusion that all the 20 have material misstatement. And what is the fact? That the remaining 15 are not having material misstatement. So what he is doing, he is incorrectly rejecting the financial statements. Is it clear? Okay. Now let us try to understand this here. See, risk of over-reliance on test of controls. Basically, that internal controls are not effective. ठीक है? Why? Let's say there were 20 internal control. Out of that, auditor ने 5 check किए and those 5 were okay. So auditor ने क्या बोला कि 20 भी okay हैं. But the fact is that in the remaining 15 internal controls, there was a lot of deviation. है ना? But auditor ने तो 5 के basis पे generalize कर लिया ना with respect to 20. So now this is what case of over-reliance on internal control. Na? Rely nahi karna chahiye na internal control pe, because the 15 are not good. But since auditor ka sample aisa aaya that the 5 that he has selected, they are good. So auditor generalized, extrapolate kar liya on the entire population that all are good. And he relied on the internal control. So this is a kind of over-reliance on internal control. Na? जितना rely करना चाहिए था उससे ज्यादा rely कर लिया ना. Same way, the example we discussed for what? Traveling bills. Risk of incorrect acceptance in case of substantive procedure. Traveling bills में auditor took a sample of 5, which were all correct. But the fact is that 15 में तो बहुत ज़्यादा mistake है. But since he has checked these 5s and he found no problem, there is an incorrect acceptance in case of substantive procedures. Because उसने extrapolate कर लिया ना on the entire 20. So in this case, it affects the effectiveness of audit. It leads to erroneous audit opinion. Students, you have done the term effectiveness and efficiency in your chapter number 2. Effectiveness क्या होता है? Effectiveness means whether you are able to achieve the end result or not. What is the end result in an audit? It is the opinion. So अगर over reliance है कि internal control अच्छे नहीं थे, but because sample में जो internal control आए, they were good. Auditor said all the internal control are good. So this is over reliance. Traveling bills or financial statements में the sample he took was good, but in fact the situation is that rest of the population is not good at all. So there is what incorrect acceptance. So auditor तो ये believe करके चल रहा है ना कि sampling सब ठीक हो रहा है. So it will have an effect on what? The opinion. Auditor may give an erroneous, wrong audit opinion, and it will affect what? Effectiveness. Why effectiveness? Because effectiveness deals with end result. Clear? Audit में effectiveness क्या होगा कि whether the auditor is able to deliver the end result, that is the opinion. Clear? Now take the other situation that auditor ने internal control out of 20 he checked 5 which were not good. So auditor ने क्या बोला? Auditor rejected the sample, है ना? And he said that I will not rely on the internal control because जो remaining 15 है वो भी good अच्छे नहीं होंगे. They are also not good, but the fact is that they are actually good. So this is what? Risk of under reliance. Why? Because sample में जो आया 5, sample में जो आया they were not good. By chance the sample was selected in such a way that they were not good. है ना? Same way in case of financial statement, out of 20 traveling bills, auditor checked 5 and he concluded that these 5 have misstatement. And he generalized it over the population that 20 में भी फिर misstatement होगा. But the fact was that 15 में तो कोई misstatement नहीं था. So this is what? Incorrect rejection. अब मेरे को बताओ. Here, what will auditor do? When he is not relying on the internal control or when he is not satisfied with the sampling process कि जो result आया जो मैंने sample लिया था, that is not correct. That has a misstatement. If you remember, I told you, what will auditor do? He'll take another sample. If there is a misstatement, he'll take another sample. And if there is still a misstatement, auditor applying his professional judgment, he may go for 100% checking. So there is an increase in the work of the auditor. Increase in the work means increase in the time and cost. That means the audit process will not be efficient. Why? Because efficiency क्या होता है? Doing the work within the time and the cost. अब यहाँ पर chances of giving erroneous audit opinion तो नहीं होगा ना. ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा क्या होगा? Auditor will be doing extra work, but there will be an impact on what? Efficiency. Because अब auditor 15 को भी डिटेल में चेक करेगा. He will not rely on the internal control. He will not go for audit sampling. He may check in detail. He will go for 100% checking. ठीक है? समझ आया? So this is the concept of sampling risk. I'll repeat it again. Very important concept. आपको descriptive type question भी आ सकता है. You may get it as a part of your case scenario. So what is sampling risk? A risk that the auditor's conclusion based on the sample may be different from the conclusion if the entire population were subjected to same audit procedure. And it will always exist because there are inherent limitations of sampling. So auditor will always try to reduce sampling risk to a low level by what? Taking a larger sample size. There can be two types of erroneous conclusion. Risk of under reliance on test of controls. You are not relying on internal control, though they are good. Risk of incorrect rejection in substantive procedure. You are not accepting the financial statements on which you have done substantive procedure. You are doing more and more checking. So it leads to inefficiency. Either effectiveness पे तो impact नहीं आएगा ना, because opinion तो correct होएगा, ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा detailed checking हो जाएगी. Risk of over reliance on test of controls. You are over relying. Why? Because the sample you checked was good. And the fact is that the rest of the population has a number of deviations. Risk of incorrect acceptance, here it affects the effectiveness of audit. Because auditor को तो ये लग रहा है ना सैम्पलिंग किया है, सैंपल अच्छा है तो एंटायर पॉपुलेशन इज गुड. इट लीड टू एरनियस ऑडिट ओपिनियन. ठीक है. सो इज इट क्लियर? गेहानी सिंह मैम क्रिस्टल क्लियर. चलो गुड. ठीक है. इज इट क्लियर? ठीक है. नाउ व्हाट इज नॉन सैम्पलिंग रिस्क? सी एनी रिस्क not related to sampling is what? Your non-sampling risk. The risk that auditor reaches an erroneous, wrong conclusion for any reason not related to sampling risk. So auditor is doing, if he has done sampling, but risk which is not related to sampling now, conclusion गलत आ रहा है, sample की वजह से नहीं, because of any other reason, that is non-sampling risk. We can just have a look at the various examples of non-sampling risk. Students, be with me. We have to cover many important topics. Okay? So non-sampling risk, there are various examples. See, the risk that the auditor reaches an erroneous, is wrong conclusion for any reason not related to sampling. Example are what? Applying audit procedure not appropriate to the objective of the audit, relying on erroneous information, erroneous confirmation. ये sampling की वजह से तो नहीं हुआ ना. ठीक है. Misinterpreting the sample results, human mistakes. ठीक है. See, sampling risk will always be there, na Hiral. So there will be some extent of acceptable sampling risk. If you have done in statistics, there are concept of sampling error, confidence level. है ना? So there is some level of sampling risk which the auditor is ready to accept. ठीक है? And see, if auditor has to reduce the sampling risk, कैसे risk? Sampling तो करना है, पर कम risky करना है. तो कैसे करोगे? ज्यादा sample size लेके. ठीक है? Clear? Hiran. ठीक है. Now performing audit procedures. If you remember the fourth step, I think was what? Audit procedures. ठीक है. So sample design हो गया, sample size हो गया, selection of method हो गया. Now what audit procedures are to be performed? Be with me. I'll थोड़ा सा speed. I'll pick up my speed now. See, performing audit procedures. So see, whatever item is selected in the sample, auditor will perform the audit procedure on each item selected. If 5 sample size was 5, so each item, whatever invoices he has selected, now he is going to perform audit procedure on that. Okay? Now, students, it might be possible. It is not possible to apply the audit procedure on the selected item. Okay? So in that case, auditor will take another item, that is replacement item. Let me just explain this to you with the help of example. So auditor was checking all the sales transactions and he took transactions and he took, let's say, a sample of 5. Okay? He was checking all the checks. Okay? The receipts, the checks, he is checking all the checks. Okay? Now, when he looked at the fourth sample, he found that it is a cancelled check. वो check जो उसने select किया था ना, with respect to receipt of payment, it was a cancelled check. So it is not possible to apply audit procedures here, na? Right? It is not possible to apply audit procedures here. So he will select another item, replacement item. Okay? And whatever item he has selected, that is called what? Replacement. It replaces the already selected item, na, जिसके ऊपर audit procedure apply नहीं हो पाता. And on that replacement item, he will perform his audit procedures. Clear? Now, when auditor finds that any of the audit procedures he is unable to perform, okay? Let's say he was checking sales and with respect to 5 samples were there, 1 sample he found that all the documentation is lost. So how will he perform audit procedures? So auditor will have to check whether this is a misstatement Auditor will have to check this in detail. And in case of internal control, he will see whether this is a deviation. Like if this is a cancelled check, auditor ऐसे थोड़ा ना छोड़ देगा. Auditor will check this also, that whether this is cancelled properly or not. उसको भी तो ठीक से चेक करना है ना, फ्रॉड तो नहीं है कुछ, तो ही विल चेक दैट. बट इन ऑर्डर टू अप्लाई द ऑडिट प्रोसीजर, बिकॉज सैंपल तो 5 का था ना, ही विल टेक अनदर आइटम. ठीक है. सेम वे, लेट्स से ऑल द सैंपल विद रिस्पेक्ट टू वन सैंपल, ऑल द डॉक्यूमेंट्स आर लॉस्ट. So he will perform audit procedures. Suppose with respect to sales, the documents are not available. He may ask for the external confirmation from the party. If external confirmation is also not received from the party, he may see the subsequent receipts. Remember subsequent payments, that after 31st March to koi paisa nahi aaya. For example, from one of the trade receivables, 2 lakh was to be received. It is been shown as 2 lakh. Now external confirmation bhi nahi aa raha hai, documents bhi nahi hai. But next year, let's say in the April month, next year, there is a receipt from this debtor worth rupees 2 lakh. So he can see, he can confirm it from here na, theek hai 2 lakh outstanding tha, 2 lakh mil gaya. That means that such amount is properly accounted for. theek hai. So what we are doing how to perform audit procedures. So first of all, audit procedures are to be performed on each item selected. If on any item selected, auditor is not able to perform the audit procedure. For example, let's say with respect to the sales, auditor wanted to perform various audit procedures, like he wanted to inquire, he wanted to inspection करना था, let's say. But अब documents ही नहीं है ना, तो क्या करना है? पहले तो देखो ये misstatement तो नहीं है. How will you see? You will inquire the management. And then whatever alternative procedures you can perform, do that. ठीक है? And take a replacement item, because sample तो 5 का maintain करना है ना, तो कोई और replacement item लो, whereby you can apply the procedures that you intended to apply on the sample. Clear है? Is it clear? Clear the concept of applying audit procedures? So I'll take you through the module C. Auditor shall perform audit procedure on each item selected. However, if the audit procedure is not applicable to item selected, he shall perform procedure on replacement item. इतना clear है कि अगर नहीं कर पा रहे हो तो एक और item ले लो, which will be called as replacement item. ठीक है. But अब उसका क्या करना है? If auditor is unable to apply designed audit procedure or suitable alternative procedures का option भी तो है ना, like external confirmation, वो भी possible नहीं है, subsequent receipts तो auditor shall treat that item as या तो deviation है या misstatement है. Like उसको ऐसे नहीं छोड़ देना, auditor needs to consider that. For example, when it is necessary to perform procedure on a replacement item, for example, cancelled check is selected while testing for evidence of payment authorization. If auditor is satisfied that check was properly cancelled such that it does not constitute a deviation, ये deviation नहीं है, तो auditor क्या करेगा? Replacement ले लेगा. A replacement would then mean a proper and a valid check. Same way, if any of the documentation of sales is lost, तो alternate procedures करो ना, ऐसे 505 करो. Even if no reply is received, तो subsequent cash receipts को check करो, right? So this was about our audit procedures. Yes, Aditi, auditor will, the client will give us the access to the next year financial statement ना. वैसे भी let's say 31st March 21 तक, let's say 22, you were conducting the audit for the financial statement ending 31st March 22. तो ये आप कहीं पर आके अगस्त सितंबर में कर रहे हो ना ऑडिट, तो तब तक तो अप्रैल की ट्रांजैक्शंस हो चुकी है, तो you can very well have a look at the transactions that have taken place. ठीक है Aditi, is it clear? So quickly send in your reply. Is it clear? Clear. Quickly send in your reply. ठीक है. सिंपल टॉपिक, लॉजिकल है, लॉजिकल बट शॉर्ट टॉपिक्स है, तो शॉर्ट नोट के लिए फेवरेट क्वेश्चंस आएंगे. ठीक है. नाउ इफ एनी डिविएशन और एनी मिसस्टेटमेंट इज नोटेड, व्हाट इज मेंट बाय डिविएशन? कि आपने कुछ सैंपल सिलेक्ट किया इंटरनल कंट्रोल का ऑफ 5 और इसके अंदर डिविएशन मिल गया. ठीक है. सेम वे अगर आपने लेट्स से ट्रैवलिंग बिल्स का कोई 5 का सैंपल लिया था और इसमें कोई मिसस्टेटमेंट मिल गया, पॉपुलेशन में नहीं, सैंपल में. ठीक है. Deviation या misstatement. Deviation is used with what? Internal control, and misstatement is used with what? The account balances and transaction, that is test of details, और ये test of controls में use करते हैं. ठीक है. अब अगर कोई deviation या misstatement होता है तो क्या करना है? उसको इग्नोर करना है? नहीं, उसको क्या करना है? देखो, सैम्पलिंग प्रोसेस है ना, वी हैव डन ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स. नाउ ऑडिटर नीड्स टू अंडरस्टैंड द नेचर एंड कॉज ऑफ डेविएशन एंड मिसस्टेटमेंट. ये सब कुछ क्यों कर रहे हो? फाइनल कंक्लूजन लेना ना, तो डेविएशन या मिसस्टेटमेंट को इग्नोर थोड़ी ना कर दोगे. ठीक है. तो सिंपल है, जो अभी हमने रिप्लेसमेंट आइटम वाला कॉन्सेप्ट पढ़ा ना कि ऑल्टरनेटिव प्रोसीजर्स भी अप्लाई करो, वो सब भी करो, तो वो देखना है. अब सिंपल सा है, जस्ट लिसन टू द स्टोरी. देखो, व्हेन लेट्स से ऑडिटर वाज चेकिंग व्हाट सेल्स ट्रांजैक्शंस. ठीक है. एंड ड्यूरिंग व्हाटएवर सैंपल ही हैज सिलेक्टेड, लेट्स से ही सिलेक्टेड अ सैंपल ऑफ 100 आउट ऑफ 1000 सेल्स इनवॉइसेस. He found that there is a misstatement in 5 invoices that he has selected. Population नहीं, sample में से 5 जो हैं उसमें there is a misstatement. And he realized that there is a common feature that all those 5 invoices जिसमें misstatement है, they pertain to, let's say, a branch X. ये पांचों के 5 सेल्स where there is a misstatement, they belong to what? A particular branch X. है ना? So auditor realized that there is what? A common feature. So it says whenever there is a misstatement or a deviation, observe that there may be a common feature. ठीक है. Let's say there is an internal control that all the traveling bills will be authorized by two signatories. ठीक है, exceeding rupees 5,000, and he saw that at 10 instances that internal control was not working, and when he realized, he saw that on the traveling bills in the first week of every month there is a problem. He will discuss with the management. Right? It might happen that in the first week one of the authorized signatories is always absent, है ना? So if there is he will try to understand nature and cause, and then he will ask the management to correct that. Right? So auditor will try to take out the common feature, like what is the type of transaction, location, product line, and period of time, and then he will identify all such items and extend the audit procedure to those items. अब उनके ऊपर काम करेगा. Why? Because there may be a possibility of fraud. ऐसा हो सकता है ना. अब देखो, फर्स्ट वीक में 2 सिग्नेटरीज होते ही नहीं थे, and that is why सारे एम्प्लॉइज क्या करते थे, in the first week only they used to get the reimbursements for traveling bills, है ना? So there might be what? Indication of possibility of fraud. ठीक है. So when once auditor has identified deviation and misstatement, first of all he'll observe, is there any common feature? And if there is a common feature, he'll identify all such transaction. He will extend his audit procedures in order to see that there should not be an indication or possibility of fraud. He will investigate such nature and causes. Simple है ना? And evaluate their possible effect on the purpose of audit procedure and other areas. ऐसा तो नहीं है fraud है, ऐसा तो नहीं है traveling bills के साथ printing, stationery and wages, everything there is a problem. So other areas of audit. Clear? Is it clear? समझ आता है? Now, in extremely rare circumstances, when auditor considers a misstatement or deviation discovered in a sample to be anomaly. What is anomaly? See, students, it might happen. Let me just give you an example. That auditor selected 5 cash payments voucher as a sample. Listen to me. I'll not repeat because we have very less time left. 5 cash payments as sample to check the cash payments. Okay? And he realized that out of this one item, there is a misstatement. That is, there are no signatures on it. Bas cash voucher hai of rupees. Let's say the amount is correct, but it is not signed. Hana? Auditor discussed with the management. Management, tell me what is this voucher? Management said that, listen, when this voucher was been passed, suddenly there was an earthquake and all the formalities with respect to signatures and everything could not be done. Okay? Or let's say auditor found a sales document which is missing. Auditor asked the management that, management, tell me what is this? Management said that due to some problem, particularly this sale invoice, all the documentation, the file got lost. We were shifting from one office to another, and particularly with respect to this trade receivable, our file got lost. ठीक है? So what does that mean? That this misstatement which auditor has identified, it is not recurring in nature ना. It is not representative of the entire population ना. ऐसा तो नहीं है ना बार बार शिफ्ट करेंगे, ऐसा तो नहीं है बार बार earthquake आएगा, एक बारी हो गया ना. So that is called anomaly. Anomaly. What is the dictionary meaning of the term anomaly? It is in something inconsistent, something unusual. ठीक है? Something unusual. So let us have a look at the definition. Anomaly may be defined as a misstatement or deviation that is demonstrably not representative of the misstatement or deviations in the population. ऐसा नहीं है कि और भी sales invoices have been lost due to shifting. Shifting एक ही बारी हुआ था ना. By chance वही वाला file has been lost. है ना? Same way earthquake था. Suddenly वो वाला voucher sign होना रह गया, but now we will correct it. Are you able to understand? So what was our topic? Deviation मिल गया. ठीक है? So in this head, when we are performing audit procedure, we found that अगर deviation है, if there is an item which has been selected on which audit procedures cannot be performed, तो first of all take a replacement item, अपना sample तो पूरा कर लो और sample पे audit procedures कर लो. But ये deviation है ना, इसको understand करो, इसके ऊपर alternative procedures भी करो. ठीक है? Now if auditors finds that yes, it is a misstatement, it is a deviation, तो क्या करना है? उसका feature देखो. What is the common feature? Identify all such items and extend your audit procedures, because हो सकता है fraud तो नहीं है. And when you are investigating the nature and causes, you evaluate its possible effect on the purpose of audit procedure. मतलब हो सकता है ना extend करना पड़ जाए audit procedure. Other areas of audit, traveling bills में problem है, हो सकता है printing stationery में भी है. ठीक है? And extremely rare circumstances, earthquake daily थोड़ी ना आता है, shifting बार बार थोड़ी ना होती है. Extremely rare circumstances, it might be possible that एक misstatement आया, but that is not representative of the entire population. So auditor, you need to consider anomaly separately. Clear? Anomaly को कैसे consider करना है? We will discuss in the next topic, which is what? Projecting misstatement. ठीक है? Listen to the entire discussion as a story. You will be able to understand each and everything. So projecting misstatement, anomaly clear है that this is a misstatement, but that is not representative of the entire population. ठीक है? Management से discuss करोगे तभी पता चलेगा ना क्या था. Now, projecting misstatements. If you remember, we did कि अगर 100 की sample में 20 mistake है, तो 1000 की population में 200 mistake है. Clear? ये किया था ना हमने. Projecting sample का जो conclusion है, इसको extrapolation project करना on the population is what? Projecting misstatement. अब misstatement आपको मिला है, उसको project करना है ना entire population में, तभी तो audit sampling किया था. ठीक है? Now the auditor is required to project misstatements for the population to obtain a broad view of scale of misstatement. Because entire population के लिए conclude करना है ना. When a misstatement has been established as an anomaly, अब देखो ये anomaly है. ठीक है? तो if this is a misstatement, will you project it on the entire population? Quickly send in your reply. Yes or no? If there is an anomaly कि out of 10,000 ना 500 का ऐसा वाउचर था जो earthquake की वजह से साइन नहीं हुआ है, तो will you project it on the entire population? Quickly send in your reply, yes or no. So the answer is no. Anomaly तो एक exceptional situation है ना. ठीक है? So when a misstatement has been established as an anomaly, it may be excluded when projecting the misstatements to the population. Very very important. True false में भी आ सकता है. ठीक है? तो उसको exclude कर दो. ठीक है? But when you are calculating the total misstatement, तब तो you will consider it ना. आप project नहीं करोगे उसको on the entire population. However, effect of any such misstatement, if uncorrected, if that has not been corrected, still needs to be considered in addition to projection of non-anomalous misstatement. Listen to me carefully, ये clear हो जाएगा. देखो हमने क्या बोला, एक anomaly आया, that is some unusual transaction which is not repetitive in nature, which is not recurring in nature. So when you're projecting your conclusion on the entire population, take the projection of non-anomalous misstatement. Anomaly का नहीं करना ना, तो किसका करना है? Non-anomalous का. Clear? Project करते हुए. But when you are calculating as to total misstatement कितना है, then you will see what? जो anomaly का misstatement है, if it is still uncorrected, plus जो भी non-anomalous misstatement आपने project किया on the entire population. Let us read this line again. However, when a misstatement has been established as an anomaly, it may be excluded when projecting misstatement to the population. आप उसको थोड़ी ना project करोगे, because that is an exception. However, the effect of any such misstatement, if uncorrected, अगर correct कर दिया तो भी उसको total misstatement में नहीं लोगे, but if it is still uncorrected, it still needs to be considered in addition to projection of non-anomalous. Non-anomalous को project किया, plus if that anomaly is still uncorrected, you will consider that while calculating total misstatement. पर project करते हुए उसको you will remove it. Yes. And why you are not projecting it on the entire population? Because it is not a representative of the population. वो तो एक बारी हो गया ना, because there was some unusual circumstances which were not repetitive in nature. I gave example of earthquake. I gave example of lost document because of shifting. है ना? पर जब आपको टोटल मिसस्टेटमेंट देखना है, तब तो आप देखोगे ना, अच्छा गलती से गलती हो गई थी, वो ठीक की या नहीं की, तो मिसस्टेटमेंट में तो इट विल कम. Clear? So this was the concept of what? Projecting misstatement. And with this, our last step of sample process is left. I will revise the entire sample process, evaluating the results of audit sampling. Okay? Now, auditor shall evaluate the results of sampling. Kya results I am? And he will also see whether the sampling has provided a reasonable basis for conclusion about the population. This was the objective of applying audit sampling ना, जो हमने beginning first session में किया. What was the objective of applying audit sampling? To draw a reasonable conclusion, to provide a reasonable basis for drawing a conclusion that about the population. So auditor, when he has applied the entire sampling process, last में evaluate तो करेगा ना कि sample results क्या हैं, whether he is able to draw a reasonable conclusion or not, है ना? Auditor will consider that. Now let's say, when with respect to test of control, auditor found that there is unexpectedly high deviation rate. He checked 10 internal control on a sample basis, and he found that at 8 times, 80% there was a deviation rate. 80% deviation hai. So what does that mean? That internal control are weak. Control risk is high. Risk of material misstatement is high. Auditor may now change his assessment of relying on the internal control. And an unexpectedly high sample deviation rate, deviation is always from what? Internal control, may lead to an increase in the assessed risk of material misstatement unless further evidence substantiating the initial assessment is obtained. Unless, let's say, the internal control he checked, see, when there is a deviation, auditor needs to consider the nature and cause. There was a deviation. Management told them that, see, there is a deviation in this internal control, but there are other internal controls also on this same assertion. So unless further audit evidence substantiating the initial assessment is obtained. Okay, same way for test of details, if unexpectedly high misstatement amount hai, so auditor, what will he do? He will say that these are materially misstated in absence of further evidence that no material misstatement exists. Agar kuch alternate audit evidence mil jata hai, then it's other thing. Otherwise, auditor will conclude that materially misstated hai. Okay? So auditor, what he'll see? He will see anomalous misstatement, effect of anomalous misstatement, plus projected non-anomalous misstatement को consider करेगा. Clear? He will make an estimate of this कि anomalous misstatement if it is still uncorrected, अभी भी sign नहीं करवाया, अनकरेक्टेड है उसको कंसीडर करना है टोटल मिसस्टेटमेंट के लिए, प्लस जो उसने प्रोजेक्ट किया ऑन द एंटायर पॉपुलेशन विच इज व्हाट नॉन अनॉमलस पॉपुलेशन, ठीक है, एंड ही विल कंपेयर दिस एक्चुअल मिसस्टेटमेंट विद व्हाट टॉलरेबल मिसस्टेटमेंट. लेट्स से उसने टॉलरेबल मिसस्टेटमेंट 5 लाख पे फिक्स किया था, हाउएवर अनॉमलस मिसस्टेटमेंट प्लस प्रोजेक्टेड नॉन अनॉमलस मिसस्टेटमेंट एक्सीड्स दिस लेवल ऑफ 5 लाख, 6 लाख हो गया है, तो this is not acceptable. Auditor will extend his audit procedure. He will not be satisfied by audit sampling. He may go for 100% checking. Clear hai? Clear hai? And when anything like this, when auditor concludes that audit sampling has not provided a reasonable basis for conclusion about the population, he will request the management. क्या क्या बोलेगा management? देखो investigate करो the misstatements identified and the potential for further misstatement. Management see there are misstatements. Traveling bills आपके कभी sign ही नहीं हुआ, traveling GST calculation is altogether wrong. So what is potential is likelihood of further misstatement. ऐसा तो नहीं है, there are more mistakes. Why? Because मैंने तो sample basis पे check किया था. So management को भी तो बोलेगा ना कि आप भी तो देखो what is the potential for further misstatement and to make necessary adjustment. So this is basically one point कि auditor management को क्या बोलेगा, ये दोनों बातें कि आप देखो, आप investigate करो, आप देखो कि potential तो नहीं है फर्दर मिसस्टेटमेंट्स का, एंड जो भी नेसेसरी एडजस्टमेंट है करो. अगर जीएसटी रेट था एडजस्टमेंट एंट्री पास करो, है ना, वट एवर एडजस्टमेंट इज टू बी डन. साइनिंग नहीं थी, इंटरनल कंट्रोल ठीक नहीं थे, तो अब करो, ठीक है. और सो दिस इज टू बी डन ऑन द पार्ट ऑफ द मैनेजमेंट. और ऑडिटर क्या करेगा, ही में चेंज, टेलर, चेंज, customize the nature, timing, extent of the further audit procedure to achieve the desired assurance. Students इसको ना ऐसे read करना, request management to investigate misstatement and potential further misstatement and to make further adjustments. यहाँ तक ये एक point है कि management के ऊपर क्या responsibility है. Auditor will request management and the next point is what? Auditor खुद से क्या करेगा? Now he'll change his NTE of substantive procedures. Clear? Is it clear? And the next page contains what? Stratification, that you all know. Tolerable misstatement. देखो, a monetary amount 5 lakhs का example दिया था ना, said by the auditor in respect of which auditor seeks to obtain appropriate level of assurance that the monetary amount said by the auditor is not exceeded by actual misstatement. Tolerable rate of deviation क्या है? Rate of deviation is with respect to what? Your internal control. यहाँ पर one more point you need to understand. देखो, हमने क्या बोला, that 10,000 के सेल्स में, रुपीज 10,000 के सेल्स में there is a mistake of 500. तो 1 लाख के सेल्स में कितना होगा? तो दिस इज कॉल्ड व्हाट? प्रोजेक्टिंग ऑफ मिसस्टेटमेंट, है ना, प्रोजेक्टिंग ऑफ मिसस्टेटमेंट. क्लियर है? बट इंटरनल कंट्रोल के केस में आप क्या बोलोगे कि आउट ऑफ 10 sample, let's say 2 times the internal control was not working, तो you will say 20% deviation rate है ना. अब इसको प्रोजेक्ट करने की तो रिक्वायरमेंट नहीं है ना, because you will say 20% deviation rate is there on the entire population of internal control, है ना. यहाँ पर तो since it is an amount that out of I'm telling you about misstatement, that out of 10,000 rupees के vouchers sales invoice, there is a mistake of 500 rupees. So I will project it on the entire population. However, tolerable rate of deviation internal control में amount तो नहीं आएगा ना. I'll say 20% rate of deviation है, तो जो sample पे होगा that will be there in the population also. So as such there is no need to do any further calculation to project it. ठीक है? So just a minute. हाँ, ये देखो. See, for test of details, the auditor shall project the misstatement found in the sample to the population, whereas for test of controls, no explicit projection of deviation is necessary. Now, since sample deviation rate is also projected deviation rate for the population as a whole. मतलब आपको अलग से calculation नहीं करना है ना, because 20% sample पे था, 20% population पे है. But if the misstatement is in रुपीज, है ना, कि 500 का मिस्टेक 10,000 में है, तो 1 लाख में कितना होगा? तो यहाँ पे तो यू नीड टू डू व्हाट? प्रोजेक्शन. टेलर इज चेंज. टेलर द NTE. Here tailor means change as per the circumstances. Tailor is customize, or you can say change. ठीक है. So with this we have completed this chapter, but before starting with the case study, I will do one thing. I'll just revise the topics that we have done today. उससे पहले just let me know whether you have understood. ये जो concepts है ना last वाले, very important for short notes, and just make a story out of all these concepts कि पहले क्या करना है, audit procedures apply करना है, वहां पे भी understood a concept of replacement item, फिर deviation भी हमने समझा, misstatement. Now the next topic is nature and cause of deviation. वहां पर हमने क्या समझा, common feature है क्या, identify करो, fraud तो नहीं है, right? So try to relate the topics. ठीक है. तो students, I will quickly revise the topics which we have covered today. So देखो, we started with what? Sample size, whereby we saw that sample size should be such that it reduces the sampling risk to an acceptably low level. ठीक है. Statistical method से भी आप कर सकते हो and professional judgment से भी, but there are certain factors which need to be considered. And I hope this exercise of factors is clear. देखो यहाँ पे everything is given, but this is given in paragraph form along with the reasoning. I have given you what? A tabular presentation. So I hope that is clear. Now the next point is selection of items. So it says, अच्छा, सैम्पल साइज में, चलो ठीक है. सिलेक्शन ऑफ आइटम्स में क्या बोला है कि इट कैन बी थ्रू नॉन स्टैटिस्टिकल बेसिस आल्सो बेस्ड ऑन जजमेंट और थ्रू स्टैटिस्टिकल सैंपल आल्सो, बट देयर शुड बी नो बायस, है ना. एंड आइटम शुड बी रिप्रेजेंटेटिव ऑफ द एंटायर पॉपुलेशन. सो व्हाट आर द मेथड्स? रैंडम सैम्पलिंग. आई गेव random sampling is what? When the samples are selected on a random basis using various tools like random number table or computer or cell phones, है ना. And it is more simple. Random sampling is more preferable for what? Your homogeneous population, similar population. If you get heterogeneous, different populations, stratified sampling. Divide it into groups, that is subpopulation or stratum. Each unit of the stratum, which is strata, selected, and you may assign weightage also. Like with respect to higher value item, you are going to check 100% of all those items, 25% for the next group, 10% for the next group, and 2% for the lowest group. ठीक है. तो ये highly diversified के लिए है. Very important. True false में आ सकता है. That simple random is preferable for homogeneous population, which is incorrect. ठीक है. Interval systematic sampling में क्या है? You will determine the sampling interval by dividing the entire population by what? The number size of sample that you need. ठीक है. Then auditor will determine the starting point, and thereafter every 50th item will become, for example, in this example, 50th item will become what? The sample. But auditor needs to be sure that it should, every 50th item should not follow any particular pattern, है ना. So auditor, what is the solution for this? Auditor may have multiple starting points, more than one starting point may be taken. कि यहाँ तक ये वाला starting point है, अब चलो यहाँ से start कर लेते हैं. तो अब every 50th नहीं आएगा ना, मतलब every 50th होगा, but it will not be 50, 100, 150, 200, ऐसे नहीं आएगा. ठीक है. Monetary unit sampling, I explained value weighted to you in detail. That here values में auditor बात करता है. ठीक है. तो since values में selection हो रहा है, वैल्यूज में ही वैल्यूएशन ऑफ रिजल्ट हो रहा है, वैल्यूज में ही सैंपल साइज आ रहा है. सो हियर वेटेज इज गिवन टू हायर वैल्यू आइटम्स, है ना. हमने एग्जांपल में देखा था कि क्यूमुलेटिवली सेल्स वैल्यू को ऐड किया, फॉर्मूला पुट किया, आपने देखा कि एवरी इस पे सिस्टमैटिक इंटरवल यूज होगा. बट हियर यू विल नॉट डिवाइड बाय द नंबर ऑफ इनवॉइसेस बट बाय वैल्यू. कि 10,000 की टोटल सेल्स है, तो मेरे को 5 सैंपल्स चाहिए, तो ₹10,000 से आई एम डिवाइडिंग. Then you saw that the sample which is collected 7,600 का आया था in our example, which and on that sample whatever conclusion we'll get will project it on the entire population of 10,000. Haphazard क्या है ना, प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट लगा रहे हैं ना, हम रैंडम नंबर टेबल यूज कर रहे हैं. प्रोफेशनल जजमेंट भी नहीं है ना, क्योंकि हम देख ही नहीं रहे क्या है. सिंपली we are picking up the invoice number. We don't know that this invoice number relates to which customer or which amount. We are just picking it up, which is not good. Block sampling, there was a doubt with respect to block sampling. Listen to it again. Contiguous is what? Adjacent. So auditor says, auditor determines some block कि ठीक है, this time I'll check all the January items of sales and October items. So block लिया एक particular month का, या auditor says that this is the sales book, the first 200 items I'm going to check. मेरा sampling हो गया. See, this is not good ना. हो सकता है ना first 200 they have a particular characteristics. Later on at the end कुछ different characteristics हैं. So therefore it is not highly recommended. ठीक है. Sampling risk क्या होता है? The risk that the conclusion based on the sample is different from the conclusion if audit procedures were applied, same audit procedures were applied on the entire population, and it will always exist. हमेशा ही रहेगा. उसको थोड़ा सा लो कैसे कर सकते हैं? By taking a larger sample size. Why? Because larger sample will be more representative of the entire population. ज्यादा से ज्यादा चेकिंग करोगे तभी तो सैम्पलिंग रिस्क थोड़ा सा कम हो जाएगा. Like sample तो लेना है, but उसको maximum possible you take the larger sample size. It can give two erroneous conclusion. What are these? Under reliance on test of controls. तो test of controls के लिए word is what? Under reliance. कि आप सोचो test of controls are not good, in fact they are. या incorrect rejection कि material misstatement है financial statement में, in fact there is no material misstatement. तो क्या होगा? Logically सोचो ना, अगर आपको लग रहा है internal control अच्छे नहीं है, आप rely नहीं करोगे, आपको लग रहा है material misstatement है, आप दोबारा से checking करोगे, तो it will lead to what? Inefficiency in conduct of audit. Opinion गलत नहीं आएगा इसमें. However, on the other hand, if there is over reliance of test of control, आपको लग रहा है कि internal control तो work कर रहे हैं, है ना? Over reliance, in fact they are not working. Same way, incorrect acceptance in case of what? Substantive procedures. आपको लग रहा है कि आपका sample एकदम correct था, तो entire population is also correct. But the fact is that the remaining population, apart from the sample, they have a lot of, that population has a lot of misstatement. So it will have an effect on the effectiveness. And it will lead to wrong audit opinion. ठीक है. नॉन सैम्पलिंग क्या है? रिस्क है, बट नॉट रिलेटेड टू सैम्पलिंग रिस्क. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, आपने ऑडिट प्रोसीजर्स गलत अप्लाई कर दिया. यू वांट टू चेक द असर्शन वेयर बाय लेट्स से एक्सटर्नल कंफर्मेशन वाज रिक्वायर्ड, बट आप तब से ट्रैवलिंग बैलेंस पूरा टीआर का कैलकुलेशन चेक करे जा रहे हो, आप एक्सटर्नल कंफर्मेशन कर ही नहीं रहे हो. ऑल्टरनेट द ऑडिट प्रोसीजर अप्लाइड इज नॉट करेक्ट. ठीक है. See, acceptably low level with respect to sampling risk. See, all these depends upon auditor's professional judgment ना, and that depends upon various factors which we have discussed. ठीक है. फैक्टर परफॉर्मिंग, देखो सिंपल है, कैसे समझना है? ईच आइटम पर ऑडिट प्रोसीजर परफॉर्म करना है. इफ इट इज नॉट एप्लीकेबल, टेक अ रिप्लेसमेंट आइटम. बाय बिकॉज अपना सैंपल तो कंप्लीट करो, एंड ऑन दैट अदर आइटम परफॉर्म ऑडिट प्रोसीजर डिजाइंड, जो आपने डिजाइन किए थे वो परफॉर्म करो. उसको इग्नोर थोड़ी ना कर दोगे. या सूटेबल ऑल्टरनेटिव प्रोसीजर करो. ठीक है. नहीं कर पा रहे हो, उसको डेविएशन लो या उसको मिसस्टेटमेंट लो. ठीक है. एंड ये सारा जो है, दीज आर ऑल व्हाट एग्जांपल्स की कैंसिल चेक है. व्हाट इज दिस? जस्ट अ मिनट, जस्ट अ मिनट. है ना? तो अप्लाइंग ऑफ प्रोसीजर्स में देयर इज अ स्मॉल पैराग्राफ ओनली, रेस्ट ऑल आर द एग्जांपल्स की कैंसिल चेक है, या लॉस्ट बाय फायर है, या एनी ऑफ द डॉक्यूमेंटेशन इज लॉस्ट, है ना? सो ऑल्टरनेटिव प्रोसीजर करो. वो भी नहीं पॉसिबल है तो सब्सिक्वेंट कैश रिसीट्स करो, एंड यू नीड टू कंसीडर इट एज अ डेविएशन और अ मिसस्टेटमेंट. अच्छा, अब कंसीडर कर लिया, अब क्या करें? आप देखो कॉमन फीचर तो नहीं है, उन सबको आइडेंटिफाई करो, एक्सटेंड करो ऑडिट प्रोसीजर टुवर्ड्स दोज आइटम्स. ऐसा तो नहीं है फ्रॉड है. ठीक है. इन्वेस्टिगेट करो नेचर एंड कॉज, एंड इवैल्यूएट द पॉसिबल इफेक्ट ऑफ पर्पस ऑफ ऑडिट प्रोसीजर इन अदर एरियाज. अगर एक्सट्रीमली रेयर सर्कमस्टांसेस में इट इज एन अनॉमली. व्हाट इज अनॉमली? कि कुछ मिसस्टेटमेंट है, बट दैट इज नॉट रिप्रेजेंटेटिव ऑफ द एंटायर पॉपुलेशन, बिकॉज इट इज नॉट रिपीटिंग अगेन एंड अगेन. आई टोल्ड यू कि एक डॉक्यूमेंट, सिर्फ यही वाला पर्टिकुलर डॉक्यूमेंट नहीं है, शिफ्टिंग में खो गया, और कोई डॉक्यूमेंट नहीं खोया, बस यही वाला फाइल वॉज लॉस्ट, है ना? या अर्थक्वेक था, उस टाइम पे साइन नहीं हुआ है, तो उसको आप एनॉमली लेके चलोगे. अब प्रोजेक्ट करते हुए क्या एनॉमली को कंसीडर करना है? नहीं. नॉन एनॉमलस मिसस्टेटमेंट को प्रोजेक्ट करेंगे फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट ऑल द पॉपुलेशन पे. बट व्हेन यू आर कैलकुलेटिंग टोटल मिसस्टेटमेंट, तो अगर एनॉमलस मिसस्टेटमेंट इज स्टिल अनकरेक्टेड, कंसीडर दैट, प्लस प्रोजेक्शन ऑफ नॉन एनॉमलस मिसस्टेटमेंट. ठीक है. और हमने देखा कि प्रोजेक्शन आपको मिसस्टेटमेंट का तो करना है, विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू टेस्ट ऑफ डिटेल्स, बट टेस्ट ऑफ कंट्रोल में तो परसेंटेज ही आया ना, तो जो सैंपल पे परसेंटेज होगा वही एंटायर पॉपुलेशन पे परसेंटेज होगा. ठीक है. यस हीरल, यू आर करेक्ट. दीज आर फॉर बोथ द मेथड्स. ठीक है. नाउ इवैल्यूएटिंग रिजल्ट्स ऑफ ऑडिट सैम्पलिंग, रिजल्ट्स देखना है एंड देखना है कि वो रीजनेबल ऑब्जेक्टिव अचीव कर रहे हैं नहीं. व्हाट वाज माय ऑब्जेक्टिव? दैट in order to draw a conclusion about the entire population. ठीक है. Now test of controls में अगर आपको लगता है that unexpectedly high rate of deviation है, तो आप क्या करोगे? आपका risk of material misstatement बढ़ गया ना, तो what you will do, you may not rely on internal control. Test of detail में क्या करोगे? You will conclude that material misstated है unless otherwise proved with the help of further audit evidence. Non-anomalous misstatement का प्रोजेक्शन प्लस एनामलस मिसस्टेटमेंट को कंसीडर करोगे एंड यू विल सी दैट एक्चुअल मिसस्टेटमेंट शुड नॉट एक्सीड द टॉलरेबल मिसस्टेटमेंट. ठीक है. अगर ऐसा कुछ होता है दैट ऑडिटर फील्स दैट भाई सैम्पलिंग इज नॉट गिविंग मी गुड रिजल्ट, तो क्या करना है? दो बातें करनी है. मैनेजमेंट को बोलो, रिक्वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट की मैनेजमेंट देखो, इन्वेस्टिगेट मिसस्टेटमेंट्स दैट हैव बीन आइडेंटिफाइड एंड मैनेजमेंट सी द पोटेंशियल फॉर फर्दर मिसस्टेटमेंट, बिकॉज मैंने तो सैंपल चेकिंग किया है ना. अब सिंस यू हैव प्रिपेयर्ड फाइनेंशियल स्टेटमेंट, यू आल्सो सी ना व्हाट कैन बी द पोटेंशियल मिसस्टेटमेंट and please take necessary adjustments. And what I am as an auditor, what I'll do, I'll change the NTA of my audit procedure, I'll extend my checking. Clear? So with this we have done the entire chapter. I will do one thing. See, just a minute. See students, this time now I have given you the answers for correct, incorrect. How to give the answers. Let us just discuss one of the correct, incorrect. Then I will take you just the next 10 minutes. Then we will finish this session. I hope you all are with me. So, sampling process. First question, correct, incorrect. Sampling process can be performed on test of details to identify misstatement of account balances and class of transaction. Performing sampling process on test of control is not possible. Quickly send in your replies. So the answer is what? Quickly send in your reply. I'll wait for 5 seconds. So the answer is incorrect. Hitesh and Himanshu have answered. So how to write the reasoning? So I think Hiral, you were asking. So see. So I have uploaded this answer sheet also. So the answer is incorrect. You will not get marks for just writing incorrect. So my system is hanged now. Just a minute. So, answer is incorrect. ठीक है. Reason, sampling process can be performed on test of detail to identify misstatement of account balances and class of transaction. Performing sampling process at test of control is also possible. Sampling process is performed on the test of control to identify deviations from the expected internal control. देखो Hiral, is it clear how to write the answer? ठीक है, चलो second भी discuss कर लेते हैं. Non-statistical sampling involves use of mathematical laws of probability in determining the appropriate sample size in varying circumstances. देखो, this is incorrect. अब now how to write the reasoning? तो non-statistical sampling के बारे में लिख दो एक line. And this basically is what? Statistical. तो यहाँ पे इसको correct कर दो. So your reasoning is done. ठीक है, देखो कैसे किया. पहले तो just rectify that statement. तो statistical sampling involves use of all these things. ठीक है. And since the word non-statistical was used, write a line about non-statistical also. Your reasoning is done. Clear? So I have given answers of multiple choice question, descriptive also. Before ending the session, I want to discuss one more thing with you. So this one, 54th, quickly read this case study. These MCQs case scenarios, these are available on your website. Quickly read these. So देखो, just this last one. Acha, I'm not able to write on this. See, Messrs. RRM and Associates have been appointed as the statutory auditors of UV Limited for financial year 21-22. The engagement partner is CA Raj, and his engagement team consists of 2 articles. CA Raj briefed his team. Okay. I am on the second paragraph now. See, you are not supposed to do like this in your exam. Hana? Abhi we are short of time. CA Raj gave a detailed audit program to his team. The audit program with respect to checking of accounts receivable and accounts payable consisted of checking some amounts on sample basis, for which CA Raj asked the team to divide accounts receivable and accounts payable into following separate groups. Okay? So I told you na कि you will get कि with respect to trade receivable क्या किया है, and you in the MCQ you will have to mention what is the name. So you have seen that with respect to trade receivable and trade payables data को divide किया. Now let us look at MCQ number 1. With respect to selecting accounts receivable and accounts payable, which method of selecting data is advised by CA Raj? So what was that? Send in your reply. क्या था वो? Stratification किया ना? So answer is what? A. Because क्या किया, डेटा को stratify किया and then samples were selected. ठीक है? Now let us have a look at the second paragraph. During the course of audit, the audit team noticed that internal control system with respect to accounts receivable were not operating effectively at few instances during the year. ठीक है? Now let us have a look at the second question. With respect to weakness in internal control system of account receivable during financial year, the audit team should consider a larger sample size or 100% examination of account receivable. This is A. Should consider a smaller sample size of account receivable. नहीं, ऐसा तो नहीं होना चाहिए ना, because internal control weak है. Should ignore such weakness of internal control system as he has no responsibility. नहीं, this is also not correct. Should give an adverse opinion. No. So the answer is what? A. ठीक है, he should consider larger sample size. Students, I have already studied it. इसलिए मैं what I'm doing कि I'm taking you through the required paragraph and then MCQ. But in the exam, you need to read the entire case study, case scenario by giving a proper time. ठीक है, अभी तो we are short of time and I have already read it. ठीक है, one of the engagement team members has following understanding that when statistical sampling is used to select a sample need not be representative. ठीक है. Second, non-statistical sampling is an approach to sampling that has random selection of sample items, use of probability theory to evaluate sample, including measurement of sampling risks characteristics. So what is the third MCQ? No, not the third, last. Is the understanding of Mr. Tarun correct? So what would his understanding? First point mein he is saying what? That statistical sample is used. When statistical sample is used to select a sample need not be representative, which is not correct. Be it statistical, be it non-statistical, sample must be representative of the entire population. So pehla wala understanding is not correct. Let's see the second one. Non-statistical sampling is an approach to sampling that has random selection of items, probability theory. No. Why? Because statistical sampling is an approach. So both are incorrect. So the answer is what? Answer is your point number D. Understanding as per 1 and 2, both are incorrect. Clear? And ठीक है. Now let us have a look at the third. Also while checking the payment with respect to miscellaneous on sample basis, the engagement team noticed that on every 9th and 10th every month, the miscellaneous expense voucher were not signed by authorized signatories. The engagement team discussed among themselves the implications of the same. So every 9th and 10th, they are looking at the vouchers. So with respect to deviation identified by auditor occurring on 9th and 10th of every month, what course of action should the firm adopt? तो audit क्या करना चाहिए firm को? RRM and associates should ignore such deviation. नहीं, this is not correct. As it exists only on few instances. No. RRM associate should extend his audit procedure to such deviated transaction. This is correct. RRM associate shall investigate the nature of causes and deviations, as such deviation may be intentional and may indicate fraud. This is also appearing to be correct. So the answer is what? Both B and C. Third question, which is the last question. Dash means dividing heterogeneous population into homogeneous subpopulation where samples are drawn from each subpopulation. And the answer is what? You all know, stratification. So D. So I hope students it is clear. So students, see, I have tried to cover one of the case. On Saturday. ठीक है? Go through entire module. Why I am writing? Because my voice is not reaching many of you. Examples plus illustrations plus questions. Questions plus answers uploaded. Do send replies whether you have. So students are saying now it is audible. So I have written everything, that please go through the entire module, including examples, illustrations, questions. I have uploaded all the questions. Do check the test your knowledge questions that are given in your module, and please send in your reply whether you have understood or not. ठीक है? In case of any doubt, we can always take that up in our next session. ठीक है? So till then, have a happy learning. Go through the module and bye bye. We will